to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our December 18th, 2017 open session meeting. Any comments?
Yeah, I move approval of the minutes from December 18th, 2017.
Motion made by Selectman Valencourt, seconded by Selectman Keen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Perfect. So contrary to how the agenda is structured tonight, I did want to give a courtesy to a couple of our residents who are here this evening, just looking to do some good for our town and not wanting to make them stay if they don't have to. And so the first, of course, is Luke Babb, who is here this evening to ask permission from the board to install a boardwalk at Osgood Hill Trail for his Eagle Scout service project. So Luke, enlighten us.
So my boardwalk will be on Osgood Hill Trail. About like 20 feet in, there's a stream that's been crossing the trail, and I was hiking it earlier this summer, and the trail was looking nice and like easy to walk on. And then I came back during the fall, and there was rocks and all this other stuff starting to show through, and I was like, it's starting to be eroded, and this needs to be fixed. And so I went and talked to the Conservation Committee, and they said they approved on my project to put a boardwalk there.
Anytime a Boy Scout wants to take that Eagle Scout project and apply it to the town, I'm fine with that. Any questions from the board?
How old are you?
I'm 16.
Okay.
17.
This is the mother of two eagles, and you know about Scouts too. We know that 18th birthday really creeps up fast, so good. So you have enough time.
When do you plan on finishing it?
Starting
it, I should say.
Sometime in spring, when earliest I can, so probably soon after the snow melts and the ground starts drying.
We should be been wet there for a long time in the spring, so good luck.
Are you going to need any type of donations or support for this project? Or?
Hopefully not. I'm going to be working on getting some donations from some companies, and then also getting donations for my troop. I got some projects planned to get money, to raise money with them and stuff.
Well, let us know when you've got it completed so we can get to work.
Yeah, we'd like to see the
Please.
pictures
Yeah,
of it when
absolutely.
it's done.
Okay.
All good.
Well, we do need to give him permission first.
Yeah.
Move
Mr.
approval?
Motion made by Selectman Smedili,
Second that?
seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Good luck.
Thank you for doing this.
Good luck, good for you.
Thank you.
So the second item that I was going to take out of order, assuming there's anybody here this evening, is we have two donations. One is an industrial-sized freezer to the senior center from the Friends of the North Andover Senior Center. I don't know if anyone is here from the Friends this evening to speak to that.
I know a little bit about it, just from the gentleman that's been doing, volunteering a lot of food by way of Stop and Shop and other organizations, that they're getting such great donations that they actually needed freezer space to keep it, fresh enough to use, and which is a great thing. Like I said, Stop and Shop has stepped up, as several other organizations that are helping our seniors, and what our seniors don't use, they bring it up to the veterans, so it's great. So I think it's a really good thing. So I would move approval.
Motion made by Selectman Smedili. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Valencourt. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Thank you to the Council on Aging. Friends of the Council on Aging. The next item is a donation from Elizabeth Armstrong to the Fire Department in the amount of $500. Is Elizabeth here this evening? Nope. So,
I would move approval for that very nice donation, and of course, a letter of thanks from the board would be great.
Second.
motion made by Selectman Smedili to also include a letter of thanks, seconded by Selectman Keen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. Thank you to Ms. Armstrong. Now going back to just the normal structure of the agenda, we have.
Actually, Mr. Chair, would you like to just do the affordable unit resale, since that's
Yeah.
just a pro forma kind of move?
Yeah, good idea.
Because we'll forget about it at the end.
I wouldn't, I would jump right back to it, but sure, if we, I mean, I'm sure there was nobody to speak to that. And so I would certainly entertain discussion. So again, this is us acting or exercising our right of first refusal, or if we so choose, for an affordable unit resale at 2 Harvest Drive, Unit 104, commonly known as Oak Ridge Village / Maplewood Reserve. The Citizens Housing and Planning Association, CHAPA, has notified the town that the affordable housing unit at this location is for sale, and it is recommended that the board exercise, or decline rather, its right of first refusal. Any,
Mr. Chair, I'll move the Board of Selectmen decline the right of first refusal for the affordable housing unit at 2 Harvest Drive, Unit 104, Oak Ridge, Maplewood Reserve.
Second.
motion made by Selectman Valencourt, seconded by Selectman Keen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? That carries. Now returning. Yes, now returning to the normal structure of the agenda. So at a meeting, our first meeting in December, we had spoken with residents about some concerns they had regarding the plan changes from MassDOT to the intersection of Mass Ave and Route 125. We spoke with those residents again on December 18th and had MassDOT lead a discussion with the neighborhood on December 19th. That discussion was attended by all 5 members of this Board of Selectmen, town and school staff, as well as approximately 35 to 40 residents, as well as approximately 8 people from MassDOT and their consultants. And we have with us this evening one of those consultants who is going to provide an update and take feedback.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Hayden. I'm with CLD Fuss & O'Neill. I'm the consultant for MassDOT on the project. Since the meeting on December 19th, we have pulled together all the comments we received from the hearing, which was wonderful. We've received a lot of feedback, and we have a lot of different things to look at and evaluate. At this point in time, though, it's pretty premature to discuss anything that we have evaluated because we're still in the process of going through everything. I can speak to a couple of the major items that were brought up and different things we're going to be looking at for those major issues. I think the biggest concern was students or children walking in the area of the project and pedestrian access. I think one of the biggest things brought up is the fact that Atkinson School is located within the project limits. And I know that there had been a lot of discussion about how we could improve the crosswalk at Adams Ave that crosses over to Atkinson, and there had been some requests to move the crosswalk down to Beacon Hill Boulevard, which unfortunately is not on this plan. It's because it is significantly outside the existing project limits right now. It would extend the project an additional 680 feet to move that crosswalk further down, and it would also require the state to put about 500 feet of sidewalk on Beacon Hill Boulevard itself to lead up to the school. And at this time, the state is not willing to postpone the project because it would also lead to additional right-of-way impacts. And considering it's a town road, the state is of the mindset that it should be a town project and it could be evaluated with the school improvements that are being evaluated by TEC with the town. So they are willing to do upgrades to the existing crosswalk, though, such as a raised crosswalk, such as a push button that has like a flash and beacon. And we're evaluating different options and working with the town engineers of what their preference would be for that location. Another concern that was brought up was, and you can see this on this one, if you want to scroll back down to the intersection itself, there's a right turn from Chickering Road onto Mass Ave. It's kind of on the bottom of the screen. And it was brought to our attention that truck traffic doesn't typically use that turn, and right now it's designed for a rather large vehicle. So the district is looking at a smaller truck to use this radius. And at a minimum, they have agreed that we will be putting a stop sign there, if nothing else, rather than a yield sign as it is currently shown on the plans.
So you're coming from which direction, taking that right-hand turn?
If you're going north on Chickering and
From
you're
Merrimack.
taking a right
Okay, thank
onto,
you.
yeah,
Just to be sure.
past the 99 kind of area. So we're in the process of evaluating that. We've run turning movements on it. We haven't had a chance to meet with MassDOT and discuss our findings yet. So once we do, we will definitely come back before the board and let you know what our findings are.
So with the smaller truck, would that accommodate a fire truck, though?
It would, yes.
It
The
would,
smaller
okay.
truck they're looking at is an SU vehicle, so it's like a U-Haul truck, and we're making sure a school bus can use it as well, just for future use. So and if a school bus can use it, a fire truck can. So
What's the timeline for that?
I don't know the timeline at this point. We have not set up a meeting with the district and MassDOT Boston. I'm guessing it will be sometime before March, we would have an answer for it. It takes time to go through all the process and meet with them and discuss things internally and come up with a solution that we all agree upon. So another one of the issues that was brought up, I have a list here. I think that pretty much covered actually everything that the board was concerned with, believe it or not. There were also a number of other concerns that were brought up with individual parcels throughout the project, and MassDOT right away is working with those individuals to try to develop different options for their parcels and how to handle things. And again, we are still in the process of evaluating things. We don't have permanent solutions for anything at this point. We have received many emails, and they are being processed, and they are being taken into consideration now. So I think that's pretty much.
So one of the things that I don't think we really had discussed too often at this board meeting in the prior two discussions, but was discussed at length, was the change that's going to happen to Autran Ave, where Autran Ave, all of a sudden, it doesn't become a one-way, but it becomes a...
Right in, right out only.
Yes.
Correct.
And I know that there were questions about whether or not there were ways around that. Is that just something that can't even be considered? I mean, I know that street, that particular entrance is so close to this intersection, and the same issue applies to that street as seems to have applied to the property that's owned by Mr. Parks that
Correct.
the state is now taking.
Yes. At this point, I don't think that's a negotiable item. That was brought up as one of the major safety concerns with the road safety audit that was conducted. And I don't foresee that would be changing. I think the right in, right out is probably the safest option for that roadway because of its proximity to the intersection. And the fact that you have the slip ramp coming around the corner from Chickering southbound onto Mass Ave westbound, what ends up happening is people rear-end folks trying to take a left onto Autran Ave because they don't expect someone to stop all of a sudden as they're taking that right turn, and they're looking back to try to see if vehicles are coming. And so it's a major conflict that they're trying to remove as part of the safety project. We
had residents actually say that they've, right, at that meeting on December 19th, say that they had been, I guess, the victims of that. Can you refresh my memory? What happens to Adams Ave? Are we changing it all right in, right out? I
Nope,
know
Adams Ave is staying
stayed
exactly
exactly the
how
same.
it is today. We're not proposing any changes to Adams Ave.
So the point of the flashing or the light that can be activated by pedestrians at the crosswalk to Atkinson, that's also on this sometime before March timeline?
Yes. I mean, we did receive some feedback from the police department, and they sent us something they liked. It's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And unfortunately, NUTCD does not allow them as of 2 weeks ago because folks have gotten patents on them, and you're not allowed to do that for a federally funded project. So we'd have to look at some of the other alternatives that are available. There are just regular flashing beacons that we can use, but the rapid flashing beacon is like 2 rectangular flashing beacons that go back and forth, basically. But unfortunately, you can't spec it out in the project unless it's a non-participating item, which would then mean the town would have to pay for it. So I would assume we would want to look at some other alternatives at this point. But again, we'd have to talk to the town engineer and see what their preference is, potentially. So, yeah.
the crosswalk falls at the very top of that yellow highlighted portion of Mass Ave right now.
Correct.
I do know that our town manager, who isn't here, did say that just outside of the scope of the project, leading into the Atkinson School property, there would be an effort by the town to actually extend the sidewalk. That's being proposed, because right now there's no sidewalk there. In fact, there's a amount of snow there right
You're saying
now.
onto the, into the
Yeah,
Atkinson
that's more just
School.
for the general
Yes,
public's
we
awareness,
are
because
going
that's
to,
outside.
we are evaluating wrapping the sidewalks around so that I do know that that is part of the project. The town is or one of the alternatives for the school project that's coming through. So we'll extend the sidewalks so they can tie in easily and have the tip-down ramps already there,
Okay.
if we can make it work. Again, it's being evaluated because there is some drainage that's on the corner that we really don't want to impact. It's a little bit, there's a detention basin and some BBW wetlands and all kinds of stuff right on that corner. So we just want to make sure that it can be constructed within the right-of-way.
And Mr. Chair, one of the things that the town is evaluating is not only the wraparound, but also extending the sidewalk into the property itself so that students are more away from the line of traffic, as opposed to, I believe now they put cones to kind of delineate where students walk. We would extend the sidewalk well into the property itself, just so that cars aren't going to accidentally drift to the right and just run over the cones. They'll be hitting curb.
Okay.
happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Just going through my notes.
I think you covered all the questions that I had, which I very much appreciate. And I just want to say, I personally, I have a child that goes to Atkinson, 2 children that go to Atkinson, and I think that these proposed measures and the things you're looking at are going to dramatically increase the safety of kids walking in that area. So I'm very happy to see the project incorporate these things.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. So we will follow back up with having you come back
Yes.
with,
So
the actual
MassDOT, I
evaluation.
spoke with the district before I came tonight, and at the district office, and they said that they will be back in touch with the board and let you know a time that you should pick, so it's a much more productive conversation. They can, let you know everything, that all the decisions that have been made.
but there will
at
be
that time.
no, I mean, this is a project that isn't, you're not even going out to bid until,
It's not supposed to go out to bid till September.
yeah, so there's not, I mean, you're going to be back at least one more time before
Yes,
this winter
correct.
anyways, so.
Correct.
um,
I mean, right now, the schedule shows that we're submitting 100% plans in February. I'm not sure that that schedule is going to stay on track because of the public hearing and all the different things that are now evaluating. So we're kind of taking a step back, and so the schedule will have to be reevaluated at this point, so.
Well, because, right, how could you, I mean, we only have as a Board of Selectmen one more meeting between now and February
Correct.
anyways. And I do think that the public, I mean, part of our discussion with you folks at the senior center was that ideally we'd get more of a concrete plan brought to us so that we would know as selectmen before all of a sudden residents were alerted to these changes were made or not made, and
So I think what will most likely happen is we will evaluate different options, and we'll develop the 100% plan so you can see what they look like. And once those 100% plans are developed, they'll come in and present them to you and discuss all the different alternatives that they've decided for different things. But they will be well coordinated with different residents and town personnel, and there's a lot of coordination going on in the background at this point, so. Okay,
thank you, Kristen.
thank you.
So that was item A under the agenda. Item B was town council, actually. We received notice that our town council, Suzanne Egan, would not be in attendance at our town meeting that is scheduled for January 30th. And so as a result, we are going to be contracting with our special town council, KP Law. I don't know if, Suzanne, if you want to speak a little bit more about Attorney Goldberg, or, I mean, there's a reason why we appoint a special town council, right? So, and this is for those instances when you leave the country on us.
Yes. Unfortunately, I have a trip scheduled for January 30th. That is one of those once-in-a-lifetime trips that I cannot possibly bow out of. So we do, the town of North Andover, the Board of Selectmen appointed special town council, I think it was in June of this year. And for that, and for the purpose of being able to pull in KP Law when needed. And so Lauren Goldberg will be at the special town meeting. I spoke with her today, and we reviewed the different warrant articles, and I will be talking with her again at the end. I believe it's going to be on the 22nd, so we'll go through, I'll give her as much background and update as possible. And obviously, Lauren Goldberg has many years of experience as a municipal council, and she has attended many town meetings, and so she will absolutely serve the town very well.
Any questions for Suzanne? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, before I move to the next item on the agenda, under communications, I guess I would open it up to other members of the board if there were any general communications they wanted to extend to the public before we go into the citizen petition discussion, or rather, communication. Hearing none. So this evening, we have, of course, on the agenda, our 6 articles that would be placed on the agenda for the warrant for our special town meeting scheduled for January 30th. Under communications this evening, we've placed the 3 citizen petitions, Articles 1, 2, and 6, as they are written right now, to allow the petitioner to come and give a 5-minute summary about what that particular article or articles accomplish. And so with that, we have Article 1, which is the prohibition of non-medical marijuana. It's a general bylaw that was submitted by residents. Do we have somebody here this evening? Mr. Salisbury? to speak to that. Now, I take Articles 1 and 2 as a group. If you, I don't think you need to sit down unless there's somebody else to speak to it, but.
I don't believe so. They're obviously tied together. My name is Charles Salisbury. I live at 301 Johnson Street. And I'm here to talk about the two articles. There are actually two that are addressing the same topic, because the municipal law unit of the Attorney General's office suggested that that was the proper way to deal with this issue.
Sorry, Charlie.
Wait for anything to stop.
Charlie, do you want me to display it on the board?
Beg pardon?
Do you want me to display it on the board, or you just?
No, that's fine. The language is, in fact, since we're talking about KP Law doing things, it comes from their bulletin to their clients about how municipalities can deal with the local control of non-medical marijuana that the law passed by the ballot in 2016 allows. And I'll regurgitate some of the stuff that I told you the last time I was here on this topic. And that's that law provided for several ways for communities to exert local control on the use of non-medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is clearly allowed by the laws that were passed in 2012. Excuse me, and use of marijuana within the community is not controllable. It's merely enterprises that are doing it that are able to be controlled, and communities can, by local option, decide to have limited or none within their existing community, as long as there is a vote of the people to do that. The first article that you're proposing is the general bylaw. It inserts a new chapter into our existing general bylaws dealing with marijuana, and the first section of it is to use the language of Copeland and Page to prohibit anything that is defined as a marijuana establishment within General Law Chapter 690, excuse me, 94G. To give you background, there have been, since that election in 2016, up until last summer, and I'm not sure what the current number is, some 32 different communities who have passed this kind of control to say, thank you, but we don't need this in our community. And that's happened locally. It was early done. In fact, last spring town meeting season and election was done in Linfield, was done in North Reading, locally, Westboro, Auburn. There are lots of communities, some 30 of them, I won't go through them at this point, which decided to do that. The thing that's different about this petition is that it's coming as a citizen petition. And in the other 33 communities, I think this is the first time it's been done by citizen petition. It's been done by the leaders of the community, putting it forward as business to be conducted and voted on within their town because they saw that it was good for their town. The night before our town meeting, the citizens of South Andover have similar language on their town meeting warrant introduced by their Board of Selectmen, where it is anticipated that it will pass without much difficulty. If North Andover wants to differentiate itself from Andover, I suggest that this isn't particularly the way you ought to do it. There are different ways of putting the best foot forward for North Andover. The second article addresses the same topic within the zoning bylaw. And again, that's at the request of the Attorney General that it be done in a couple of places. And although the positioning may be done, it's done exactly the way it was done in North Reading. We have in our zoning bylaw a very exhaustive list of permitted uses by district, and long list of things that are permitted. There are no similar tables of prohibited uses, although that's a perfectly acceptable way of defining something for a law, and in fact was done in the town of North Reading and approved by the Attorney General. So this merely introduces for the first time in town of North Andover some prohibited uses within the zoning bylaw, all districts, and that's for marijuana establishments previously defined. And I think that's all I've got at the moment. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
No, Mr. Salisbury, if you wouldn't mind, later in the agenda, we do end up voting on this, and I guess if there are any questions, if you wouldn't mind staying for the meeting.
Fine.
Can't anticipate any questions. Can't anticipate what questions would pop up, but
Go to see you.
it'd be nice to have you in the audience.
Thank you.
The third item is Article 6. It's the authorization of the Town Manager and Board of Selectmen to negotiate and execute a host community agreement with Valley Green Grow, Inc. I know there are several folks in the audience this evening affiliated with Valley Green Grow. I don't know who's here to speak. It is important to clarify that this is, despite the term authorization, the Board of Selectmen already possesses the authority to enter into such host community agreements with the town manager and any entity such as Valley Green Grow. However, this was a petition, it was the petition, in fact, that prompted this town meeting with several hundred signatures, and so I see we have Attorney Rosen here this evening to speak on behalf of the petitioner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I'm stepping in for Dr. Goldstein, who has bronchitis this evening, asked me to speak on his behalf and just describe for you briefly what we were doing by Article 6, or the proposed language for Article 6. We felt as though it was important to let the community know what the financial framework would be if a project of this type passed through zoning, special permit, and state, and was allowed to operate at the property at 1600 Osgood Street. We looked at prior history in the town. In particular, we looked at the solar project we did where a pilot was a town meeting warrant article, and we felt as though because there were some new items that were being discussed, including the potential use of a pilot, a host community agreement, and a community fund, which would be something that I think was something of a first of its kind in town. We felt as though it was important to put them in a warrant and submit them for town meeting. At the end of the day, if they're not needed, we would accept that based on a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen or the town manager. However, we felt it was important to put them together in a warrant, present them as part of a petition, and as part of the petition we used to call the special town meeting. I could go into any of the details of it if you'd like, but I also understand that this isn't the forum for that. It's merely to present the article. So I'm happy to just leave it at that unless there are any questions.
So just a clarification from our town council. Host community agreements do not require the consent of town meeting. The
That's correct.
pilots do. Am I mistaken?
A pilot agreement does, yes.
And does this address a pilot? Should a pilot be an option in the future? We would have to return to a town meeting anyways if a pilot was.
Most likely, yes, you would. Yes.
Sorry,
But-
repeat
So,
that.
so I believe what you're asking me is whether or not this town meeting article authorizes the town to enter into a pilot agreement with regard to this project?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's, I guess that
So
unless I
it's-
misunderstood you, Attorney
We
Rosen.
tried to put in a global provision that allowed the town to authorize personal property taxes, host community fees, and any other community-related expenses. So we did include provision for personal property taxes.
So it's my understanding that a pilot agreement is only allowed if there's a statutory authorization for that, and there is nothing as currently in the general laws that provides for a pilot agreement with regard to marijuana. Or any in particular use such as this. So it's debatable whether a host community agreement would include a pilot agreement in the first place. We would have to get to that point in the first instance. And then secondly, if it was determined that there is statutory authority to enter into a pilot agreement for something like this, then it would go back to town meeting because it would go before the town meeting in a different posture. Because it would have to come under that statutory authority, and we'd have to determine the terms of that agreement.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, so town meeting really doesn't have the authority to tell us that we have to do a host community agreement. But yet, we've called a special town meeting to have us do something that they don't really have the authority to do. Of course, we like to listen to our constituents and so forth and so on. So I'm still, yet,
If I may, you're really talking about two different things. I mean, the petition for a special town meeting is separate and distinct as to whether town meeting actually has the authority to impose something on the executive board of the town. So the fact that a special town meeting petition was submitted requires the board by law to set the town meeting for 45 days. Now, the fact that the article that generated that activity, when all is said and done,
town meeting can still vote favorable on this article, but it has no impact on the board or the town manager.
It is not a binding.
It is not a binding vote. The petitioner, for instance, included several specific items in the article. That's all well and good, but it doesn't mean that that's what the board or the town manager will negotiate with the applicant.
So
It
So
could
can I
be-
just add a further question to that? So you're saying the implications of this passing as it is basically nothing?
Correct.
It doesn't limit what we do, we can
Nope.
add something else in, it doesn't limit us
We
in any
can,
way.
you know, and later on in the agenda, there's actually, the board is being asked, you know, do you want the town manager to resume negotiations regardless of what town meeting can vote no.
Well, that was
And that's
my-
still not
my
going to have an
question.
impact on what the board and the town manager do.
This
So-
article
so-
was basically put on just to establish the town meeting.
Just to generate the town meeting, correct?
that
So-
has,
so just-
that has no authority to do this on a cold night, January 30th, to get a whole sense of community and people involved, and I would argue that you're disenfranchising the elderly, the handicapped, and mothers.
Ms. Medili, we've all run for election in March weather. March is no better than January, and 700 voters called the special town meeting ultimately. So it's again, we are compelled to have this.
I can disagree with you on that. I just think the timing is really unfortunate, and I have a right to
That-
say
It
that.
is
You do-
unfortunate, but
But Ms.
But go
Medili,
ahead.
you picked the date.
I did because we had no
Well-
choice, as you said.
We didn't have a
Exactly.
choice.
yeah, we shouldn't debate this because we have to have it, it's there, whether we want it is not the point. Okay, so the implications of this not passing at town meeting, let's say this doesn't pass. We are not therefore somehow limited in our ability to put
Nope.
a host community agreement.
Nope,
We can
Nope.
still do it.
yes.
Okay.
Because this board.
And now, what will happen if, in town meeting, citizens propose amendments to this language?
Still not binding.
Still non-binding?
Correct.
But there's going to be a bunch of time wasted of people proposing
Well-
amendments to
Well, there could be
this.
suggestions that come out of it that might
Right.
be valid
When we
suggestions.
negotiate a host community agreement on town meeting floor?
No.
Well, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do
Right,
that.
that's
Right.
right.
Argument that came up
Right.
last year, but it is what it is. I mean, unless the petitioners withdraw it, we have to, it has to be taken up one way or the other. It's on there, it's got the necessary signatures to be on there, so we have to take it up.
Are they planning to withdraw it?
I don't know. I'm not one of the petitioners.
I will ask that question of Mr. Rosen, now that the zoning articles are.
It is the last warrant that evening, and I believe on your agenda, you have an item this evening to authorize the town manager to resume negotiations.
That does not negate.
I understand. So we have 22 more days between now and town meeting. I will get back to you with an answer to that question before town meeting starts.
So regardless of whether we vote favorable, unfavorable, town meeting.
No
votes-
action.
No action, town meeting votes, they like it, they don't like it, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
Nothing matters.
It is not binding. The vote is not binding. I mean, it's unfortunate, that's not to put down town meeting, it's just the way it is. The board and the town manager already have the authority to negotiate host community agreements.
May I ask you to clarify for me and maybe others in the audience, so this host community agreement, is this for your medical marijuana or for the recreational marijuana?
I think it would be for either.
Either, but you,
Let me just, hold on one sec. No, it's for a registered marijuana dispensary. It's for medical.
it's for medical.
Yep.
Okay, but if we could go over for just a moment, so how much of the facility is going to be dedicated towards medical marijuana? We have 1.1 million that's being proposed, so how much of that will be for medical marijuana?
Has not been determined yet.
But we're going to a town meeting to discuss these things. How much is for, and that's what you're telling the public with your robocalls, how much would be for the testing and the medical research? How much of the space is for
I
that?
believe the warrant article that's been presented requires 15% of the space to be earmarked for that.
Okay, so the rest, subtract that out, of the 1.1 million is really for recreational marijuana. but that doesn't
Or
really get,
medical marijuana.
well, you've just said that it's
No, I
probably
didn't.
less than that.
No, you said that, I didn't say that, Rosemary.
The 15% research you just said is the office space, isn't it?
It's the
not
research and
cultivation
development,
space.
correct.
So the 1.1 million is cultivation space.
Cultivation,
And that
correct.
is going to be some portion recreational, some portion medical. You haven't
Cor-
stated.
Correct.
Office space is going to be 15%
Correct.
research.
Attorney Rosen, don't you think at this stage, as we're getting close to going to town meeting, and you're making phone calls saying it's medical marijuana and medical research, that we have a right to know what percentage is recreational marijuana?
When we decide, we'll let you know.
And when you decide, you'll let us know. And we're all
We
going
have to go before the planning board, we have to apply for special permits, we have to go before the state, we have to make presentations to the state. There are plenty of things that we're working on a daily basis, and we will sit down and we will go through all of those terms and conditions, all of the designs, which we've already shown preliminary plans for, and we will meet with the planning board on a bylaw, if a bylaw passes, and we will go through all of the elements in finer detail in our application.
Respectfully speaking, sir, I am deeply troubled, and I'm going to try to say this as respectfully as I can. As you advertise and make phone calls and robocalls telling everybody it's medical marijuana and medical research, it seems to be a bit of a bait and switch.
I don't think there's any bait and switch. I don't think there's anybody on our team that has ever said, we won't grow recreational at this facility. No one has ever said that.
Then I think you need, at this point in the game, you need to delineate and let us know what we're getting.
Right now, we don't know exactly what those numbers are.
Troubling, sir.
Can I make a clarification? Earlier, you said, referring to this host community agreement article, you noted that it was for a registered marijuana facility, dispensary, and therefore medical, but it also says, and other allowed medical uses, marijuana uses, which would be recreational, if I understand that correctly. So I read this, that it was for medical and recreational. The host agreement article. Can I just clarify that?
It's based on total
Yes, I
cultivation.
think that's.
To the extent that there potentially are other allowed marijuana uses, that is also possible. It might include the research and development. It could include recreational. It could include medical.
So let me ask you, because both host community agreements are somewhat different. Medical can be quite a bit more generous without restrictions, but recreational, it needs to be tied into to offset the negative effects of such a facility. They're different, so how do we delineate that then? They're two different types of host
I don't believe
community.
they are different.
I'm pretty sure they are.
My understanding is that there's not much limitation on medical
Exactly.
host community agreements, but there
Is going to be
are going to
recreational.
be on recreational. I don't think we exactly know what they're going to be. Could be, right? Could be some limitations on recreational. It's unknown to us, so it's all fine and good to say this is a floor, but we don't know if that is achievable because we don't know what the limitations are going to be.
And again,
By
understanding,
the
this is
state.
not a proposal that we're asking anybody to accept. We're not presenting a number and we're saying this is our agreement. We're not asking the town to vote on an agreement. What we put forth is authority to start to negotiate this, and these are the types of things that would get worked out in a discussion and in a negotiation. This is to set out some parameters, a baseline, a floor, a commitment, an understanding that it would be numbers of this magnitude or larger, and it would be something that would be negotiated with the town as part of that process.
Don't you think, Mr. Rosen, though, that we as a municipality, frankly, right now, this room isn't at all as large as the community that will be gathered at town meeting. I'm sure you're aware that we've now reserved the field house, which hasn't last been done since 2006 when we set a record with 3,500 people at our town meeting. And so it's going to be a much sizable, much larger crowd, I'm sure with a lot of people that have not been following this issue as closely as everybody in this room has. Those aren't unfair questions that were asked about what the breakdown will be. This is language you provided to us, too.
So when will we have that breakdown? Will we have it before town meeting? Will the people know, what they voted on before town meeting? I understand you went through a process that has to be agree to and go through the planning board, et cetera, but will you have some delineation?
I think I can talk to my clients about putting something together. I think some of that might also come out if there are, as item F tonight, if the town authorizes the town manager to continue resuming those discussions. I think that that can be included as part of those discussions.
One of the things, sir, you also talk about the medical research. Could you tell us which companies are you'll be working with on medical research?
So we have some of those companies. I think you've seen the expressions of interest in the past posted on our website. We continue to reach out to a number of other companies. At the end of the day, until we have permitting for this site, nobody's going to sign a lease and enter into an agreement to come onto the property. I think as we've discussed with the planning board, and I think as the planning board has incorporated into their bylaw, they're requiring us to commit 15% of the site to that, and we're very comfortable with that.
But you won't disclose?
No, you have letters of, I can't disclose something that I don't have under contract. Okay, so what we have is we have expressions of interest from people, but we also have people who aren't going to sign leases and agreements with us until they know they can actually do what they want to do at our property. So they're all on the webpage. They've been presented in the past. Nobody has revoked their letters or their expressions of interest.
And so, could you at least, I mean, again, not everybody here has iPads or computers. I mean, I don't know if you have even just a basic list, and I know that you forwarded them to the Board of Selectmen as they've come up,
Yep.
but I don't think that's an unreasonable question to have answered in this
And
setting.
also, too, testing sites, my understanding is that the grower cannot have a financial interest in the testing site. However, the owner, actually, if you lease that property to a medical research company, then the owner would have a financial interest. So I'm just curious how that will work out.
There are two types of laboratories testing and research and development. There's laboratories testing your own cannabis so that you can put your cannabis into the marketplace. We would not be testing our own cannabis at our facility.
Okay.
There are laboratories, research and development, that can do testing under the research and development provisions that are currently being proposed under the newest regulations being promulgated by the CCC, and we would do those types of laboratory testing, research and development. So it might be testing for medical-related issues. It might be testing for impairment-based issues. It wouldn't be testing our own cannabis to put our own cannabis back into the market.
Okay, but what about the financial interest of the owner of the property? Are you going to be, will you be owning that space or leasing that to another organization?
It's going to depend on whether somebody comes
Because-
forward and wants to do it, or whether to get it started, we're going to end up doing it ourselves.
Because as I've stated, if you have a financial interest, that you really can't be doing the testing.
You
And the
can't-
financial interest would be the tenant paying for their rent.
You can't have a financial interest in a laboratory that tests your own cannabis that you're putting in a marketplace. We can have a laboratory, and we can own a financial interest in a research and development laboratory that's testing cannabis for purposes other than selling cannabis in the marketplace. So if we want to test for medical diseases, if we want to test for impairment, if we want to have a research and development lab that's going to test cannabis for patentable issues, not for laboratory testing to take and put into the marketplace, the owner of the property can have an interest in that. They're two completely different things. So some of the companies are Rebion, Hakon, Lumira. Dan, I can't read your handwriting on some of the ones. Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse us, Dan Leary with the project development team. We also have several turnkey laboratory companies, like Attorney Rosen was saying, that would come in and set up these testing labs. Again, not independent testing labs under the license, but true laboratories that you might envision in an R&D type of space. Several lighting companies. LED lighting is one of the biggest capital costs of the project, so this is a very big and emerging industry. In fact, one of the companies is a Fortune 500, and the other one is a second very large company that does LED lighting. And these are all perfectly suited to take place in this facility.
But you don't have any commitment as of yet. These are people who've expressed interest or an inquiry.
As I already answered, we don't have a permitted site. We don't have, the uses are not allowed on the property. When we have an allowed use, one of the very first things we will do is start negotiating those agreements and get final definitive commitments.
So does the lighting companies and those that are kind of not working directly with the cannabis, are they part of that 15%, or are they outside of that 15%? Is the 15% reserved just for research and development on cannabis products, where I would think the lighting is a different type of, I mean, it affects the cannabis, but it's not
I
directly.
think we would present that in front of the planning board. We have to go in and get permits every time we have somebody that's dealing with cannabis under the bylaws drafted. We would go in front of the board. We would say, we have a company, say it's Sylvania Lighting, and they want to put up a 10,000 square foot floor where they test the results of how the lighting impacts the growth. It's partially for cannabis, it's partially for indoor horticulture. They want to measure the electric usage, how it impacts the temperature in the room, and do other types of studies. We would go before the planning board. We would ask the planning board, does this qualify as an R&D use under the proposed bylaw? If the planning board told us that qualified as an R&D use, we would table that in under the 15% of R&D use. If they told us it didn't, then we would have to look at underlying zoning and see if it was an allowable use under the underlying I-2 district.
But at this point, so the way that this section of the agenda was going to be structured is that each citizen petition would be summarized by the applicant and questions would be answered regarding, and in this case, the specific language of the host community agreement as was written. I'd ask that Mr. Rosen, you and other representatives from the Osgood property please stay, because of course, at the end of this
I
section of
actually
the
have
agenda,
a couple
we
more,
aren't voting.
couple more questions. So we've asked you several times, you've applied for 3 dispensaries. And where will those be? You need this by April 1st. To your credit, you talked about how we do need to move it along because we've got this looming April 1st date that is very important to the applicant. So where are the dispensaries that you need with the medical marijuana?
We're working on those now.
You don't have any names that you could give us? Usually things like that are quite public because you got to go before town. And
Actually, at the start of the negotiations, they're quite private, which is why we're keeping them close to the vest. As soon as we have something, and hopefully we will have them well before the January 30th town meeting, we would be more than happy to come in front of this board and disclose them to the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and disclose them at the town meeting.
And if you don't have them, what would your intentions be then?
We will continue to move forward and find them and open them and develop them.
So how does that process work? You identify a space first and then apply for a license through the state, or?
It's a combination of things. So you have local and you have state. So on the state process, you have to go through your management operation profile, you have to submit your applications, and then you have to get invited to siting. We have been invited to siting. Once you're invited to siting, you have to put together your siting application, and that has to include showing where you're going to grow and where you're going to sell. For each location, you have to show that you have the property under control, there is a pathway forward with zoning, and that you have a non-opposition letter. So for instance, at 1600 Osgood Street, we have the property under control. They're the owners. We would have a pathway under zoning if the bylaw passes. We would have a non-opposition letter if the Board of Selectmen enters into a non-opposition letter. So with those 3 things, that would qualify for cultivation under the siting profile to allow us to get a provisional certificate. We would have to do the exact same thing for a recreational site.
Sorry, you have to have those things for the cultivation location and the dispensing location.
And for a dispensary
So
location.
you don't have a dispensing location identified yet? But you're
No,
going to get through all this
so
process?
I have property under agreement, under control. We're in negotiations with a particular community on a non-opposition letter. So we actually are working on those things. We do have locations identified, and we are negotiating with town officials and property owners.
How long does the process usually take? I know this is being rushed at your own admission, which is, again, to your credit, the honesty.
What process?
For you to have the hearings that are necessary for these other communities, for the non-opposition letter, for a host community agreement, and the other communities, because you have stated that there will be no dispensaries in the town of North Andover.
So the only thing we need from the other communities is a non-opposition letter. We don't need a host community agreement. We don't need a special permit. You have to show that either it's in a zoning overlay or that it's not prohibited. You know, so one of the sites we're looking at is a town that has no restrictions. Another site that we're looking at, that we have the property under agreement, is in a cannabis overlay district, a medical marijuana overlay district. So we have sites identified in communities where there is a pathway to zoning. And in those communities, we're meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the town managers, and we're trying to negotiate non-opposition letters and the template letters of intent for host community agreements.
To be clear, so
Yep.
you said one of those communities, it was in an MMOD district, so that means the intention is to put a medical marijuana dispensary there?
Yes.
So why did you just say, though, that you wouldn't need, you no longer need host community agreements for letters of non-opposition?
No, you don't need them to get your provisional certificate for siting profile. So you
From
get your
the
provisional
dispensary location.
from this, so you go, at the state, you go through the management operation profile, you get invited to siting profile.
Yep.
When you get invited to siting profile, you need to submit those 3 things to get your provisional certificate. Once you get your provisional certificate, you're good. Now you are in the April 1st queue, you've met the requirements. Now you have to go from provisional certificate to final certificate. As long as you have the provisional certificate, you made the April 1st queue. To get the final certificate, you have to get your special permit, you have to get your building permit, and you build it, and they come inspect it.
One
So
thing
that's
that,
the difference between provisional and final.
But, sorry, just to clarify, you said earlier that you did not need a host community agreement from the dispensary location. You
To
just need
get
it from the
To
cultivation
get to the,
location,
no,
the
to
siting.
to apply for a provisional, you don't need a host community
You
agreement.
do need a letter of non-opposition,
You-
correct?
To get,
You need a letter of non-opposition. Well, but no one's going to sign a letter of non-opposition without a host
Yeah,
community
I mean, in
agreement.
theory, this board
I
could be
kinda-
giving you a letter
Regina.
of opposition right now. That's the only leverage that municipalities
Yeah.
have for a host community agreement. So because you need a letter of non-opposition, what community wouldn't want to
you need the
negotiate?
host community agreement to get your final certificate of registration, so the town still has the leverage over you, because if you don't enter into a host community agreement, you're not going to get your final certificate. You have to get your final, too. So you have to go through planning, you have to get your special permit if you're in a zone that requires a special permit. There are certain triggers for provisional, there are certain triggers for final.
now, so you want to get into the queue for April 1st, but is there an ordering of communities that would be ahead of you? My understanding is, what, like a couple hundred that are also in the
If
queue?
you have your provisional for April 1st, you're in the queue on April 1st.
Okay. One thing that we really have not talked much about, and I'm a little bit concerned about, is that, again, you've said that no dispensaries, and I think most people would agree that's good, but what about delivery service? Could somebody from a different town come to our facility in North Andover, purchase some of marijuana, and then make deliveries, whether it be for medical or recreational, to any community, including our own, by car or vehicle? We haven't really talked about that, and especially with Lawrence, Methuen, North Reading, and probably Andover rejecting the marijuana, will this make us a hot spot where delivery trucks will be distributing recreational and medical marijuana to people's homes, and so forth and so
The
on?
license in North Andover would be for cultivation and manufacturing only. It would not be for retail sales, so we could not sell out of the North Andover location.
No, but you wouldn't be selling. It would be, it's almost like a subcontract. So someone from another community who does do that, but they come and buy and pick up the product from our facility to deliver to whomever requests it, whether
I
it
mean,
be medical or
Could a
recreational.
registered marijuana dispensary in Georgetown deliver marijuana to North Andover? The answer is probably yes.
No, what I was saying is, can they come
purchase it
and
from
pick
the
up the
facility.
product? And if I'm not correct with this, then somebody please tell me my information is wrong. My understanding is they could pick up the product for them to deliver and sell throughout the community. They take whatever vehicle, small truck or whatever.
Like an ice cream truck or
Well,
at-home
actually,
delivery. almost.
Pizza delivery cars.
And I believe that they can. And we have not talked about what your position would be with that, because I think that's deeply troubling to me. It's a high-risk business, it's a cash business, and to have trucks coming to North Andover to pick up product for a company maybe in Cambridge or Boston and making deliveries, I think we need to know about that.
So from my own personal perspective, and I really haven't given this any thought, I think it's an ingenious idea. I think that it is not in our plans, and I think that the planning board could certainly, as part of their permit and approval, prohibit that from taking place, because that's not what we're looking to do here.
So with that being said, so Mr., again, I don't want them to leave, so again, under this part of the agenda, it's a summary of what each one of the articles on our warrant is, and because we've actually already skipped, well, not skipped, we've already addressed all the other items on the agenda, we would then move forward, open the warrant, accept the warrant, close the warrant, deal with discussion, and then at the point where it comes for recommendations from this board, we would allow anybody in the audience to speak on any or all of the articles that they would have, and then, of course, we as selectmen would continue to be able to ask, as I explained to Mr. Salisbury, ask Mr. Rosen questions or ask Mr. Simons, who has been patiently waiting in the wings to discuss about the proposal from the planning board with 2 articles regarding zoning.
My apologies to you if I seem like I was being aggressive, but we are at the midnight hour for something that is so transformative for the town of North Andover, to have a $1.1 million marijuana growing facility, most of it being recreational, that it's time for the pointed questions and to get down to business. This is a huge decision for this community, and thank you for your patience.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Simons?
Oh, yeah. I was
so-
corrected, not dollars, square feet, but I think you all knew what I meant.
So the planning board has been doing their due diligence since this summer in tackling very broadly and finally the,
Yes, maybe if I could
Issues before
just step back, provide a little bit of context of what we thought our mandate and mission was and where we're taking at this point and what we'd like to do to finish the process, is that at last year's town meeting, one of the objections of the planning board, it was probably not the only thread of discussion that came up, but was that this was premature, that the article was too brief, too limited, didn't address a facility anywhere close to the size and materiality of this, and that we had to conduct a lot more due diligence about the best way to manage and regulate a facility of this type. And I know personally I spoke very vocally on that point, and I really believe that. So since the town meeting, virtually, in fact, every single meeting that the planning board has had since then, we've addressed this topic, and we've kept town council very busy late at night just for the last couple of months and working on this. But we've really gone in, I think, 2 or 3 different directions. We have crafted a bylaw which we think addresses the concerns about managing and controlling this. And so that basically, if we were to go forward with a project this size and magnitude, we have an article we think addresses and reasonably controls that as the best we can. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the details. As we got to that result, what we've done is we've really brought in a lot of perspectives. Town council has very closely worked with colleagues at the state level and other communities to understand the language of the law, what other communities have written, and a lot of the language in our bylaws crafted off of sort of model language and state level language. Granted, we are dealing with a circumstance where all the state regulations are not in place, but what we've ended up with, we think, addresses, at least as best we can tell, some of those things. What we've also tried to do was to try to understand better what the specific applicant at 1600 Osgood was doing without it being a formal public hearing process, because we wanted to understand, in order to put the right regulatory framework in place, we wanted to understand how the potential applicant might address things like water, smell, and other security, other externalities, and so forth. So they have met with us a number of times, and as we all remember, they conducted a meeting at the facility and a tour of the facility so that people could get a better understanding of the business side of it and what they're trying to do, which I think helped us and helped inform us put together what we ended up putting together. Now, the planning board basically has been working this for a long time, and we've come to an article that's, 2 articles really. One is It's an overlay district that says these are the areas where you're allowed to put this use, and then the actual regulations of this use. In the best of all worlds, we absolutely would have preferred to do this at regular town meeting. That was our preference, that's what we did state to the applicant. We understand that the applicant has the prerogative to go a little bit sooner. We would have preferred otherwise, but we are where we are. And we believe that if we didn't put our article forward, the applicant would have just taken our article and put it forward as the article of record anyway. So we think we're at the same place. Basically, let me sort of put it fundamentally for people, is that if you believe this use, a very large-scale cultivation facility, is appropriate for North Andover, we think we've drafted as close to a good article to manage that as you can. But if you believe that this use is not good for the community, then you would oppose that article. And even within the planning board, I think still at this point we have people in both of those camps, that there's certain members of the planning board are not convinced that from a public policy point of view, a facility of this size makes sense. But I think the planning board is of the persuasion that if you are going to do something like this bylaw is a good way to manage it and regulate it. So that's basically sort of the yin and yang and everything of what we've done. We have a bylaw, there's always, with a bylaw this complicated, there's always going to be drafting changes. We're probably going to make little things that we've put in there that might turn out to be, maybe we should tweak this, maybe we should tweak that. That's part of what the public hearing process is. We start tomorrow night. We'll have our first public hearing on it, and we'll continue it on the 16th and the 23rd. And so we'll actually have 3 meetings. Not as broad and as long a public process as we would have liked, but we're trying to solicit a ton of opinion on this. We've brought the master plan committee and their powers of marketing and getting people out and getting feedback. And so we expect to have people that come and get their feedback as well. So that's where we are. That's basically the gist of it. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions on elements of the article, but that's sort of the big picture.
What would you have seen as being, because you said it's not as broad as you would have liked, what would have the process been had it gone through the course that you had anticipated and landed on the May town meeting?
I think what we would have had is we would have had dedicated meetings with different constituencies, different communities of people of interest along the way. It's, give or take, if we had finished it up about now in a few weeks, we would have for example, we would have loved to have come to the Board of Selectmen and spent an hour. Now, you guys would probably go crazy after an hour of the detail of what we proposed.
I think your meetings have shown that we actually are more than willing to attend your meetings.
I mean, and I know many of you come to our meetings, so you know how the sausage making works. But a review collectively by the Board of Selectmen of the thought process that we went through and a lot of the key things from beginning to end would be great. We may not get that opportunity. Having what I'm going to say is more of a general public meeting at the library or something like that where you solicit opinions on an open-ended nature, it would have been nice to have something like that. But, we are having 3 meetings, and 3 meetings will allow for a fair amount of input. It's just not as much as I think we would have wanted, but we are where we are.
So, John, again, in attending the meetings and watching them, I mean, it really is amazing the level of detail and exchange on all of this. My question, just sort of mechanical question, what does your committee do between now and town meeting? Are you going to make a recommendation?
Well, what we will do is, and this is with the statutory process, is that first of all, we're required to have a public hearing. Mm-hmm. And so that required public hearing will begin tomorrow night. We will, we will hear that 3 times. We will get feedback. It's probably what normally happens in an article of this complexity. There's some drafting changes, so the version that's in front of the town meeting might be slightly different than the version we have now, but that's what we would do. And then before the town meeting, probably our last meeting, the one on the 23rd, we would make a formal recommendation on our article. And as I said, I think what it comes down to is I think the board is generally of the persuasion that if you want to allow this use, it's a good article. But I think there's a difference of opinion of whether this is an appropriate use for a public policy point of view. So,
Two different questions.
they're separate questions, yeah.
Okay.
The one thing that came up at your meeting, and I believe it was the planning board member, Peter Boynton, who suggested that even though, but you are stating it now, even though you're moving it forward, does not necessarily mean that you all support it. But that, there was discussion, should you be able to put that into the warrant, saying that we're moving it forward, our decision has not been made, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're all for it. And there seemed to have been a feeling amongst the planning board, well, that's not appropriate, and I was a little confused at that.
I think what happened was that sort of came up at the end of the night.
It did.
Kind of in a context that we weren't quite sure where it came from. I mean, I think the view that I articulated is probably a view that everybody in the planning board would agree to. I'll bring it up tomorrow night and see if they agree.
Well, right,
yeah.
and I think it's almost fair warning to the public, yes, we are sponsoring this, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily agree with it. And I think I could understand why he felt as though it looked like you were promoting it.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think that's, I spent some time after that meeting thinking about it, and that's why I was very careful about what I said tonight about differentiating the two things, way to look at it, so.
Okay, and I appreciate that, because
Yeah.
I think, again, at the short, hastened time period, that I think we need to be very clear as to what's going on and be transparent, and so.
Well, the planning board will make their recommendation, favorable or unfavorable, right? And then they'll be able to defend that.
I understand, but
If it
on
only
the-
says unfavorable, then I'm sure, or favorable, I'm sure the question will come up. What was the board's decision on that?
Yeah.
And just for clarifications, because of the logistics, as Mr. Simon says, they're not going to be taking a position till till the 23rd, their third public hearing.
Right.
So the warrant
It'll be
that will
done.
be accepted and closed, hopefully tonight, will simply say that the planning board's recommendations will be made at town meeting. That's how it will be published, because they obviously, we need to publish the warrant, but they're not going to make their vote till the 23rd, so it will be published as the planning board recommendations to be made at town meeting on 3 articles, I believe, right?
Right, yes,
Yeah.
correct. Yes.
What's the date of that it needs to be finalized for publication?
Tomorrow. Thank you.
Tomorrow?
It's 21 days.
Okay. Makes sense. Well, we are really in a compressed schedule.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
Well,
That's
again,
exactly,
state law
I think
tells
all
you
of
you
our
have to do it
points.
within
Yes.
45
Yes.
days, so.
Which is, I mean, we're meeting 5 straight Tuesdays, the planning board,
Yeah.
so.
And
yeah,
thank you for
that's-
that.
yeah.
And keep in mind, too, that the statute is that 1 public meeting is required. Our planning board has always traditionally held 3 public hearings, which is what they've decided to do in this case also.
And we appreciate you squishing it all in to get that done.
Yeah.
It's been noticed.
Yes, thank you.
I've been corrected, it's 14 days, but we have to get it to the printer in order to get it
Right,
out on
right, that's
time.
kind of what I meant. I know it's the
Yeah.
printing is one of those long polls.
Great, thank you.
Do you mind, Mr. Simons, just staying?
Just one more
Yeah,
night
okay,
having
yeah.
meetings, you don't mind, do you? You just-
Probably the earliest he'll get home regardless.
Thank you. And so with that, actually, we're now leaving the communications and announcements, unless anybody has thought of communications or announcements that have nothing to do with the articles before us this evening. Otherwise, we jump right ahead. We did.
Oh, how about this one? Do we have public skating open and things like that we should be?
That's been ongoing, all right, that's been ongoing for a
I know, but I
while.
don't know that we've ever mentioned it. Maybe you have.
We did way back in November when it started.
Well, why don't you tell
October.
everyone a little bit about
Public skating on Sunday evenings at Brooks School, sponsored by our Youth and Recreation Department, every Sunday evening. Bring your own skates, though, there's no skate rentals.
That's a light diversion, huh?
it?
So,
Something fun.
so we are, that being said, we have some patient business owners who are here this evening. If the board so is inclined to move into licensing, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to move into licensing.
Motion made by Selectman Smedili, seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? We're in licensing.
Okay, we're now in licensing. So first on the agenda in licensing is an item that was continued from our 12/18 meeting. This is a public hearing for an alleged liquor violation at North Andover Restaurant, Inc., doing business as Rolf's on November 22nd, 2017. So just as way of procedure for this hearing, Only the board members, town council, and the license holder or that person's counsel would be allowed to speak and or ask questions. No questions or comments from the public will be allowed. Okay? So in this case, we will hear the report from the officers who investigated and responded to the call, and then we will allow the license holder to also disclose the facts around the incident as seen by them. So I would like to hear a motion to go into that public hearing.
Motion to move into public hearing. Do you want to state the matter? I don't have it in front of me. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Motion to enter public hearing.
And yes, this is a public hearing for a alleged liquor violation at North Andover Restaurant on November 22nd, 2017.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Okay, we are now in the public hearing. I'd like to ask the officers involved in the incident to come forward and either read or tell us their version of the story or the incident.
You can both come to the table at the same
Yeah.
time if you wish.
And if you could just give your name, although we all know who you are, but
Good evening, Officer Driscoll. Officer Carter.
so if you'd like to just read your report from that night is fine.
Well, I'll give you a brief synopsis. I don't want to put anybody's name out there.
No, no, you don't
That
need
is
to do
still
that.
ongoing. I don't wish to do that at this time.
No, we're not going to put the names out there, just the events that happened that night is all we need.
Okay. On November 22nd, at roughly 10:50 at night, we received a call for a fight at North Andover Restaurant, also known as Rolf's Pub. Myself, Officer Bader, and Officer Logan responded to that location. As I pulled up in front, I was waved down by a handful of people that there was people on the side of the building still fighting. I made my way around the corner, and I was confronted by about 24 people in the street and parking lot. After a discussion, a small fight, one person was placed under arrest and transported back to the station by myself. Officer Bader stayed on the scene to investigate further what took place inside the pub. Once back at the station, Officer Bader called me and told me what had taken place inside the pub, who was involved in it. One of the people who was inside and involved in it was the person that I arrested. In speaking with him, and again, not using the gentleman's name, I had asked the person, was he in fact inside the restaurant? I'm sorry, inside the pub. He said, yes, he was. And I said, you're only 20. He said, yes, I was inside the bar. I asked, was there a person out front who was carding people? He said, yes, there was. I said, well, how'd you get in? He said, I walked up. Someone said to him in his nickname, hey, Bubba, how you doing? Come on in. And he walked in. I asked if he had a drink. He said, yes, he did. And then the two groups of people got into a fight, and you know the rest.
Okay. So, Officer Bader, would you like to, is that it? Officer Driscoll?
I'm sorry, yes, that's pretty much everything.
Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry, this gentleman was under arrest, and two others are being summoned into court by Officer Bader for their participation, but they had already left.
But their participation was for the fighting, not for underage?
Correct, they were over
drinking?
21, they were just fighting.
Okay,
The person I had would not be 21 until actually December 11th.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So my involvement was basically after Officer Driscoll already got there. The fight was already over. When I pulled up out front, he already had one party in custody and in his cruiser. I was quickly approached by people that were coming out of the bar. 3 people identified themselves as victims from the fight and started pointing out people to me that were trying to walk away that all ended up being defendants, or one of the defendants. So from getting stories from everybody involved, from the victims, I ended up summoning 2 other parties above and beyond the party that Officer Driscoll summoned for charges stemming to the fight. But I never actually went into the bar until late after getting information from everybody involved, and it was probably at least 20 minutes later, and at that point, pretty much everybody had left at that point. They were getting everybody out of the place, so. it wasn't until after the fact, when the victims that I had identified, the party that Officer Driscoll had already in custody as being involved in the altercation, I contacted him back at the station and just told him that he was, that this party was involved and needed to be charged, and he subsequently added the charge relating to the fight. So,
Anything else?
nope.
Any questions from the board, for Officer Driscoll, Officer Bada?
They have cameras in Rolf's? Were cameras reviewed?
I believe they do have cameras. Yes, I believe that, I think I was with Officer Logan. I think we talked to them about about getting video surveillance, but I'm not sure what the outcome of that was. I don't know if the cameras are actually recording or not. I'm not aware if they do or they don't.
So in this incident then, and I'll direct this to Town Council, there's actually two violations here. One of them being potentially serving an underage person, and then the second is disturbances or disorderly conduct related to licensed premises adjacent to indoor parking lots. That's correct, right? So
Yes,
there's actually
yeah.
two violations being discussed.
Two violations of the regulations, yes.
Okay. Okay.
I just, question just in terms of your investigation, did you come up with any evidence or any determination about the authenticity of the statement that this 20-year-old went in and was not carded? Did
No,
you
I
have
never
evidence
had
to address
any
that?
dealings with the particular individual that he ended up arresting. I was dealing with the two victims and then getting information and ultimately charging two other people that were, one was still on scene, one of them had actually fled out of the two that I ended up charging. But as far as information on like I said, I didn't even know anything about who he had in custody until kind of after the fact.
To answer that question, after speaking with Officer Barter, I went back and sat down with the person I had under arrest. I asked him, I don't know if you had a copy of my report or not, but I asked him point blank if he actually went inside the bar. He said yes. I asked, how did you get into the bar when you were only 20? The person said, he walked up to the front door, someone called out his name, again, his nickname. Hey, Bubba, you're all set, come on in. I asked if anyone carded him. He said no. Was there a person outside carding people? He said yes. Walked in. I said, did you have a drink? He said yes.
But did you talk to anybody at Rolf's, or did anybody to address their perspective on that sequence of events, or you only have the statement in here from the perpetrator at this point?
Correct.
right?
I just have the statement from the person I had under arrest. Once he was
Okay.
arrested, he was brought back to the station right away, getting away from the scene.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Do you mind hanging around a bit in case there are questions from the license holder? Okay, the next thing I'd like to do is actually, before we ask the license holder to come up, is actually read the notification or the notice that was sent to the license holder. So this was sent December 6, 2017 to Leslie Carlson, manager, North Andover Restaurant, Inc., DBA Rolf's, 39 Main Street, North Andover, Mass., regarding a possible violation. Dear Ms. Carlson, the North Andover License Commission hereby notifies you and requests you be present at the public hearing to be held on December 18, 2017, which was continued from that date, at 7 p.m. on the second floor of meeting room at the North Andover Town Hall, 120 Main Street, North Andover, Mass., regarding an alleged violation of North Andover Alcoholic Beverage Regulations, Section 32, and the alcoholic beverage license issued under Section 12 of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 138, to North Andover Restaurant, Inc., deemed doing business as Rolf's, Leslie Carlson, manager. The violation relates to the alleged incident described in the attached incident report, which occurred at your establishment on November 22, 2017, at approximately 10:50 p.m. As stated in the report, the violation is pursuant to 204 CMR 2.05, permitting an illegality on the licensed premises, to wit, Chapter 138, Section 34, sale or delivery of an alcoholic beverage to a person under 21 years of age, and alleged violations of Section 32 of the North Andover Alcoholic Beverage Regulations. At this hearing, you have the right to have counsel present. You may have witnesses testify on your behalf, and you will be entitled to question witnesses. As a result of testimony to be given that night, the action of the commission could result in a warning, suspension, revocation, or modification of your license. Sincerely, Richard Valencourt, licensing chair. So at this time, I would ask if there are no other witnesses for the town, just the two officers. And the board, are there any further questions for the officers after I've read the notice? Okay. So I would now give the license holder, Ms. Carlson, an opportunity to speak or question the witnesses. Just for the record, your name and address, and if you did receive the notice of the hearing as stated.
Sure. My name is Leslie Carlson, address 22 Davis Street, North Andover. Yes, I did receive notification of the hearing.
Okay, so Ms. Carlson, I have to ask you if you do stipulate to the events as described by the officers this evening.
Yes, I was working that evening. Yes, there was an altercation outside. Apparently, it stemmed between a few of the patrons inside. Everything went outside. However, I'm concerned because, from my standpoint, I don't know that this person was in here. Do we know if he was stamped? Do we know he was just...
So for the record, the license holder does have a right to question.
Oh,
the officers.
I'm
No,
sorry.
you do have a right to question the question.
Right.
You want me to answer that question?
I
I don't know anything about the stamp, but the altercation took place inside the bar.
Well,
He
that's...
was identified by the two, actually the three people that were technically victims as being the suspect. And the fight took place inside, not outside.
So what we're saying is somehow he got in. He got through the front door.
Correct.
So
But
this
nobody
was-
saw him drinking or stamped.
As far as us,
I don't know. I mean, as far as me, as far as the doorman, I had 3 bartenders on, a bouncer in the front, a bouncer in the back, and a bar back. Nobody came in without being stamped. I know that the altercation happened close to the back door, so I don't know if somebody pushed in through there. And this is the first time I've heard of 2 violations on that night, so my apologies. I didn't realize that there
Well,
was
the
a
one was the
second.
fight, but yeah, actually, the notice was only for the drinking, so.
Okay. You know, like I said, we had one in the front, one in the back, and I know in the police report it said that the person who was carting out front was wearing a sweater. No, they weren't. You know, the bouncers were both in gray shirts, and all of the bartenders were in black shirts. I don't know if he was stamped. I don't know if he was drinking there. I honestly can't speak to that. I don't know who this is, but nobody left their post that night. Yes, there was an altercation. Yes, that's concerning. But I can't speak to the under 21. I can't imagine. We have scanners. We've got, the person at the front door was, never left his post.
This might be a better
Okay.
question for,
So I've been corrected again, so that, in the notice where it says "and alleged violations of section 32", that does cover the fight, as far as the notice that you received. So section 32 of our bylaw talks about the disturbance.
That covers the disturbance in the parking lot. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because it is related to parking lots as well. It covers parking lots as well.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
So, okay, so that part of it, you are stipulating to the facts of the disturbance in the fight, but as far as the purchasing of alcohol by the underage person, you're not, because you don't know that actually occurred. You're saying that may not
I
have
can't
occurred.
imagine for a second that could have possibly occurred, that we were so well covered that night. It's our busiest night of the year. We take this very seriously. And, as soon as something like that happened, we shut it down that night, because that's not what we want. This is not who we are. And it's disheartening to think that something like this would have happened. But at the same time, I can't imagine that this 20-year-old kid could even get up to the bar and have a drink without being stamped, without having his ID checked.
Officer
just can't see
Driscoll,
it.
just a question to you. Did you actually see him in the bar at all?
No, I did not.
And Officer Barty, did you see him in the bar? No.
Did we perform a breathalyzer or blood alcohol test on him to determine if he had had anything to drink?
No, he was under arrest for disorderly conduct, no.
But by his admission, he said he was in there and he was drinking. And so, I mean, potentially, hypothetically, he could have pushed his way through the door or got through the door without being noticed and then somehow got a drink inside.
But I don't see how that could happen when we had people at the front, people at the back, and then the bartenders checking for a stamp. So the only person that would have stamped him was at the front door. And we don't know if he was stamped or not.
And there's no video footage of this night?
That video footage is no longer, no.
So there was video footage?
It keeps for 30 days. What had happened is we had gone through an upgrade with the new DVR, and when I went back to get it, it was unfortunately erased.
Okay. Do you have any other witnesses or anybody else here that you want to give testimony at all?
I mean, no, I wasn't, I could, tonight's the hearing. No, I didn't pull in, the bartender on board or the doorman. They're just going to say the same exact thing that I said, that they never saw him in there. They don't recall serving him a drink ever, so
Now,
Are all your bartenders tip certified?
they're all tip certified, yes.
How about the door people? Do they need to be tip
The
certified?
DERB people are not tip certified, no. Just everybody serving alcohol is.
I had a little bit of a problem hearing you, so could you explain again? So the fight was in the bar, and he was part of the fight inside the bar. And then I thought you said, no, he was outside the bar. So could you explain that again? Whomever.
So the victims, the fight took place in the bar.
In the bar.
In the back, towards where the bathrooms are. There's a couch back there, and there's
Okay.
a whole area back there towards the back door. According to all the statements of the victims, the fight took place inside.
Okay, but did you see the person that Ms. Carlson is saying she wasn't sure that he was in the bar?
No, when I got there, it was already over.
Okay.
I never even went inside until after the fact, because everybody was coming out of the building when I arrived, and I was at the front. I had people that were involved grabbing me, telling me that they had been involved in a fight, and were pointing out the people involved to me, so I was trying to kind of keep everybody together and get statements from everybody. So I never went inside until basically after, because they shut it down after the fight took place, and everybody was pretty much out by the time.
So Officer Driscoll, did you see this gentleman inside the bar?
No, when I first saw him, he was on Main Street by the back of the building.
Okay, that's what I thought, and then I heard something that made me think differently. Do you ever allow people to buy, 2 drinks and bring them back to their table, one for them and one from their, so that could he have been in the bar and got a drink from a friend who was legal and stamped?
No, on a night like that especially, it's absolutely not. And nobody is even allowed in there unless they're carded and stamped. So there was no under 21 allowed at that point. It's the night before Thanksgiving, so.
That is a big night.
It's.
What kind of stamp are you using? Because, it's kind of not that difficult, depending on your stamp, to lick your hand and smash it on someone else's and
Wow.
rub off the
yeah.
stamp.
I did not know that.
Sorry.
Regina!
Hadn't thought of that one.
I guess
Now they all know.
Wow.
This 20-year-old kids watching our
I'm
selectmen's
not
meetings.
sure not that many 20-year-olds are watching this meeting. I mean, what kind of stamp are you using?
I mean, it's a specific stamp that has our logo on it and our name on it.
But what kind of ink, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
Is it just
Ink
like it's an
and-
ink pad?
yeah.
Right,
just
right, it's an ink pad.
so
But
it's
my
not-
point being is that there's nobody getting through the front door. You know, we had somebody at the back door, somebody at the front door, and the side door was locked, which was okay by the building department because we had the 2 egresses, don't worry. But, so, nobody was getting in unless they were carded and verified. That's what I'm saying, and stamped. And there was nobody under 21.
The witnesses that reported that he was in the bar, were they intoxicated?
I mean, they've been drinking, but nothing that I was concerned about.
Okay.
So the fight actually took place inside the bar, not in the parking lot then?
According to the statements of the people involved.
And was the person that was arrested for underage, well, not for underage, was serving the peace, was he obviously involved in a fight? Was he, did he have markings on him that would say that he was involved? I believe I read that in your report that he did, right?
No, that was the victim who had markings.
Okay.
This person did not.
How were his
I did
hands?
not know he had even been part of the fight
Oh, okay.
at the time. Didn't find out until later, speaking to lots about
It
it.
was almost like two different, like, incidents from the start. When Officer Driscoll got there, he was dealing with people coming out the back of the building that were still kind of going at it, yelling at each other. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but you approached this gentleman, and he kind of turned his yelling at whoever, they were still jarring back and forth. It became directed at him, which is ultimately how he ended up in custody. It wasn't until after the fact, he had already left the scene, that I was getting all the information from the other people involved, or I determined that the party he already had in custody was one of the people involved in the fight inside. That's why when I realized that, I called him and said, I need to add a charge, can you add a charge, because he's going to be one of the people involved in the fight.
In the fight inside, correct, so he was in the bar. Okay.
Just to add on what Officer Bada said, one of the victims flagged me down outside. The person I had arrested was one of the people that was accused of assaulting him inside the building. He was still going at it on the street. They wouldn't stop, he got arrested.
Okay, so any other questions from the board for any of the witnesses here? License holder?
About how many people were in the bar that night? Do you have an idea?
At that point in time, 70?
And then so you had 2 doormen or bouncers or whatever the word you want to use, and how many bartenders,
3,
including yourself?
including myself.
So 5 people
then
for
one bar
approximately, and one what, please?
And 1 bar back.
What is a bar back?
Sorry, 1 person to clear the tables.
I see, kind of like a bus.
Right,
kind
be a
of-
lookout.
Or bus person. So 5, 6 employees for 70 people.
Well, it's a constant line outside all night, you know.
Yeah.
At that point in
Okay.
time, it was, you know, we had up to probably 85, 90 that night. At that point in time, it was where it was.
So 1 person for approximately, what, 15 people? Okay, just trying to get an idea of how well
The
you were
whole-
covered.
The whole way we look at this is to keep against people at the front, you know, to make sure that they're stopping everybody, you know, and properly carding and scanning IDs and stamping properly, and then nobody's allowed to enter through any other way.
So you have a scanner at both entrances, you have scanners?
No, just at the front. We don't allow anybody to enter through the back door.
Okay.
Does a buzzer go off if that door gets opened?
No, that's why we had, well, yes, a buzzer does go off. but
So you
that's
know
why
if
we had-
somebody opened the door, because something will, an alarm will go or whatever.
Correct, but that night we had somebody at the back door just to make sure
So you had two checks and balances, a person in the
that
buzzer.
everybody was to be funneled through the front door, just to prevent something like this from happening.
So people weren't on the back deck at all?
People
Okay.
were on the back deck, but the back deck was closed, and that's why there's somebody on there. So if they were on the back deck, I don't know if you have the back door and then you have the stairs. So he's outside at the back door, preventing anybody from coming up or down the stairs.
Okay.
And then if somebody had to go to their car or something, then you have to go back around from, those are the rules.
Which may have been the Bubba, you're all set thing, because maybe they thought you went out to his car or came back or something like that.
No, you'd have to go straight through the front door. I mean, this isn't the first year I've been doing the night before Thanksgiving, so we take this very seriously.
Any other questions? Okay, I will hear a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing?
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Now, we need to now discuss or make a motion as to whether or not we feel a violation did indeed occur. And again, there was two separate violations in this case, one being the disturbance, which is a violation of one of our bylaws, and one being the underage drinking. So if someone is apt to make a motion, we could do so, and then we can discuss it after that. But we would need a motion and a second first to discuss.
I move that the Board of Selectmen find that on November 22nd, 2017, at North Andover Restaurant, DBA Rolf's, 39 Main Street, a liquor license violation did or did not occur pursuant to Town of North Andover alcoholic beverages regulations and 204 CMR 2.0252, permitting an illegality on the licensed premises, to wit, Chapter 138, Section 34, sale or delivery of an alcoholic beverage to a person under the age of 21.
You have to make a choice of the did or did not.
Yeah.
Right, you,
It was,
The motion is either did or did not.
you need a second to think about it?
Did.
Did occur.
okay, so your motion is in the affirmative that it did occur, that a violation did occur.
Right. Yes, correct.
Okay, so do we have a second to that? Anybody going to second that motion?
I'll second it just for the sake of discussion, but I got to tell you, I'm conflicted. I am really conflicted, and I'm usually not conflicted in issues such as this. Something happened, we all know that,
Right.
but we're not totally sure.
Very clear that there was a fight, right? I mean, that's indisputable. There was a fight, there was a disturbance. There's no evidence except the person's word, who is currently under arrest, that he was in there drinking, and that was how he got in.
I think anyone who's ever watched me, I'm usually, this one, I am conflicted. And it's, so when was the last incident, Mr. Chair, that was this
The
specific?
last incident was, I believe, in September of 2016, when there was a liquor
Sting
license.
operation.
Yeah, there was a liquor license violation, and where there was a grant provided by the state, and the local police were using an underage person to go into various establishments and attempt to buy alcohol. And
I think this one, though, was actually regarding the Merrimack kids. It was during their sting operation in other locations
Quite a few were-
in town.
quite a
But
few were.
This
Well,
was
you were
when
the
we,
licensing chair at that point.
yeah, this is when we became aware that there was a preponderance, there were quite a few Merrimack kids in North Andover that were under the age of 21 that had fake IDs, and that's when we made the point to all licensees that they have more than just eyes, and that they actually use technology to try and find root out fake IDs. So
But
that,
it-
if I recall, there was a unique set of circumstances that we almost stumbled upon it by accident because there was an altercation or something there.
But at that time, we found there was a violation that
Yes,
had occurred.
yes.
And at that time, we issued a written letter to the license holder that a violation had occurred.
Which was just a little bit more than a year prior to,
Yes.
October 11th, 2016.
right?
That's when we turned around and purchased the scanners.
Which was a very good move.
Yeah, that was good. That was proactive, or not proactive, but reactive, I guess. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor in the affirmative to determine that, to say that a violation did occur. Do we want to separate these out? I mean, there were two violations that we're talking about. One is the disturbance, and one is the underage drinking. Do we want to separate those out, or we want to take them together? Because right now, I believe...
Let's try
we're taking-
separating them out first.
Okay, so right now, we've got, the motion is taken together. So, do we need to amend that motion to...
Are you okay with that? It was your
Yeah, no,
motion. I
that's fine.
seconded it.
Amend it.
So do we need to amend that motion to either be the underage drinking violation or the disturbance? So who wants to amend that motion to reflect one of those two?
Wait, how is it both? It just says under 21,
Yeah, the motion.
Yeah, it doesn't include the
It
fight,
It doesn't include the fighting, just the,
as far as I understand the
Right.
language, but maybe.
unless it falls under 138, section
The
3.
motion that he read, according to our secretary, who
It's
is...
only for the violation of the under 21.
under 21.
Okay. Oh, fine.
Thank
okay.
you for
So
keeping
it's
us-
already,
It looks
so
like
the
we don't
separation
have a
is
motion.
already there.
Right.
Separation is already there, okay.
But we
perfect.
don't have a motion.
Or
Under,
we can create one.
yeah.
Okay, so we're on to the main motion here, that that a underage drinking violation occurred. It's been motioned and seconded for discussion. Okay, do we need further discussion? What we're hearing is there's some ambiguity on whether or not we feel that it actually occurred, because it's somewhat hearsay that the person said he was in there drinking after he'd been placed under arrest. So, further discussion on it?
I mean, are people disputing that he was in the bar?
Yeah, that's...
Is that your feeling, that it's ambiguous
Basically,
whether or not
because-
he was in the bar, or just whether or
Well,
not he was drinking while
He was
in the
never
bar?
seen in the bar by the officers, but people said that he was in the bar.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Is it illegal for somebody under the age of 21 to be inside of Rolf's Pub? As the license, I mean, the issue is whether the individual drank. Is it illegal to be under the age of 21 and be
Public
inside
hearing is
Rolf's?
closed, so they can't.
They can't answer that question?
Right.
Do we
You
have,
can ask counsel.
Like, is it a restaurant also?
I mean,
You can't
it's
ask-
it's not illegal for someone under the age of 21 to be inside the 99. It is illegal to serve them in the 99, to use an example of another common pub in North Andover. And so,
So depending on the license, and I don't have that information in front of me, but depending on the license that's issued, if there is no restriction on somebody entering who's under the age of 21, then there would not be. So it's really very fact-specific, and I don't have that information in front of me in the booklet, but I don't believe that's not what is before you tonight. That's not your
No,
motion.
but
Your
so-
motion is-
but
And
the-
the violation is
but
not
the
the...
very-
The question is, can someone be, because it's a restaurant, they have a common victualer's license as well as an alcohol license, can they be in there?
Yeah.
Do we have any establishments that do not allow minors? I don't think that we do. I don't ever recall, and I can't even ask a question of someone who served as our licensing chair for many years. I don't recall that we have any. And if,
I don't
think we
probably
do.
agree with you, but
Bars only.
I'm just thinking specifically of St. Patrick's Day, or rather after the Santa Parade, for instance. I mean, you see people going in there because they go to listen to people playing the bagpipes, and there's definitely individuals that are under the age of 21. I mean, that's during the day, but then at what point then does it cross the line that,
Right, so if I can just sort of chime in here, it's just what is before, so then, if the licensing commission focuses on the notice of the violation that has been presented to the bar owner, which you have two notices of violation, one is the disturbance and one is the underage drinking. And so that's really, those are the two issues before the commission at this point, and you have them broken down. So whether or not, and you've heard your officers discussed this, and you've heard
Of course.
those admissions, and so that's sort of, you have to look at the evidence before you, the testimony before you, and the credibility of the witnesses, and then you make your determination on the basis of that. And that's your determination as to whether that violation occurred, not whether or not he was, the question, I guess the violation is not whether or not he was in the bar, but whether or not you've heard evidence through testimony that
That he was served
that he
well
was
inside the
served.
bar.
And the testimony that Officer Driscoll made was that he was told by the defendant that he was served. So,
I mean,
so the information is coming from the defendant himself.
So
that he was
there was an admission. Okay.
I would personally question why any person under the age of 21 would admit to a police officer that they drank any alcohol in a bar if they were not 21.
Well, for instance, let's say that they were at a friend's house. I would think any under 21-year-old would say, where did that, or if I'm cornered by a police officer and I'm under 21, I would think, oh geez, I don't want my friend to get in trouble. You know, I just got
He
into
wasn't at a
Ralph's.
friend's house.
He wasn't.
No, but
But he's-
she's saying beforehand, or maybe he stole it from home or something, because that was what he's trying to say. Oh, wow.
It just seems, there's a lot of conjecture here, and unfortunately, we don't have both sides of the investigation here. At the end of the day, as you say, it just comes down to one person's statement. We don't have anything within the bar, and I guess it's one of those things where, how far do we want to take that chain? And I guess that's, I'm with you, Rosemary, in terms of, you have somebody who's intoxicated, but we didn't test to see if they were in fact intoxicated. That was an observation, but there wasn't a breathalyzer test. We have testimony that says this person was underage and drinking, but we don't have anything that corroborates that. And I guess when I look at this in terms of licensing, the impact on an establishment and making that determination, I guess I can look to my fellow selectmen here and say, there's a big impact on somebody's license and somebody's business. I guess I would want to have as much comfort in the facts as possible, and there are just some big gaps here. They're not knowable. We have a tape that doesn't exist anymore. We didn't have questioning of the bartenders. We didn't, we don't have those pieces, and I can appreciate at the moment you're trying to keep, keep the disturbance down. But to your point, Rosemary, again, this is an event that we have to take notice of.
There's, as we're talking about this, I think there's some different approaches. Again, I think anybody who's watched me during these hearings, I'm usually pretty tough, but I'm really struggling that we don't have what I would say is really comfortable, solid evidence. So I personally am leaning towards, and again, I know this will surprise my board members, is a very strong written warning, and if there were any infractions within, we could determine a certain amount of days, that the suspension would be pretty severe.
Well, first we need to determine whether a violation occurred.
You're right.
before we
I'm
can
sorry.
go
I'm
and
getting
do
ahead of
that.
myself.
So I think we still are in the discussion on whether or not a violation occurred for underage drinking at Ross on that evening on November 22nd. So I guess, is there further discussion I tend to agree. I mean, we have no hard evidence that he was served, and, again, we only have his word statement to the officer that he was drinking in the bar. And I do agree with you. I don't know why anybody would say that. Why would we mix drinking
I
and
think
underage
Phil brought
drinking?
up a good point, though.
Yeah.
Selectmen, I mean,
He's closer
You-
to the age groups than the rest of
you,
us.
you and well, so for instance, hypothetically, I'm over your house and I'm having some drinks, or let's reverse it. I'm at a bar, I'm having some drinks, then I go over to your house and have some drinks, and then I leave and crash my car. It would be in my interest to say I never went to your house and that I was only at the bar, even if I only had one drink. Because then otherwise there's the risk of liability on my friend at his house. And so,
Boy, a lot of confessions between the couple of board
Yeah.
members.
there's nothing, I
tonight.
mean, that's just the reality of what the law, unfortunately, right, the law
I know.
says. And so, I mean, who's gonna get in trouble is what college-age kids are thinking about, right? Who's gonna get in trouble? Is it my friend? Is it this friend? We were at this friend's house and his parents are on vacation, so let's blame the bar. I'm not saying
No, I get the
that,
scenario.
but
I understand.
I'm sure if I got arrested outside a bar, I would think that I was going to be tested, and so perhaps that was just him getting in front of it. I don't know. I mean, it's clear, based on the testimony, that an incident did occur out front anyways.
On property.
But at this point, I just know of other times that we've had this issue brought before us, and if it's only going by the word of one person, again, and it's the person that was arrested, I just think that there should always be more than just the word of one person, because right now you have two people saying conflicting things, and there's no actual evidence.
You're just saying, yeah, you're saying there's no hard evidence, nothing that really proves that he had gotten a drink there other than his word, so, other than what he admitted to. Which is powerful too, he admitted to it, but, you know.
I mean, we don't know anything. I mean, does he live right behind there? I don't know. That it doesn't matter where he lives. I mean, there were instances, right, where somebody just wants to blame an establishment rather than blame a private residence because they're concerned about the repercussions against somebody that they know. Or
Are you going to throw some more smoke
I am
on
going to,
this
because
thing?
this does happen, where somebody goes to one establishment and then goes to another and then says they were only ever at that establishment because they're a regular at the other establishment where they were served, and so they say they were only at one location. It happens. I mean, I say that as somebody who has taken the tip class multiple times.
Oh, this is what they said.
Well, I mean, the tip certification course is for the most part trying to identify whether someone's been overserved. I mean, it teaches you how you should try to identify a fake ID, but of course, technology, as we learned last year, is always changing on this.
Okay, so, further comments? Are we ready to vote? So we have a motion that a violation did occur on November 22nd at Rolf's for underage drinking. That's the motion that's on the table. It's been seconded. So all those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed?
No.
No. Okay, so it's determined there's no violation that occurred, or no clear violation that occurred on that.
For
Now,
serving someone under the age of 21.
serving someone under the age of 21. Now, do we have a motion for the disturbance that evening?
Town council, do you have the section of state law that they would be violated?
Chris has it in front of him.
Okay, here we go. Move that the Board of Selectmen find that on November 22nd, 2017, at the North Andover Restaurant, DBA Rolf's, 39 Main Street, Chapter 138, Section 32, disturbance or disorderly conduct related to the licensed premises adjacent to property and/or its parking lots did occur.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second that a disturbance did occur in the form of a fight. Okay, discussion on this.
I think it's fairly evident.
Yeah, and actually, I think the license holder did stipulate to those
Yeah.
facts that a fight did occur. So, further
I
discussion?
mean, this was a rowdy crowd, and I think, right, at one point, I thought I had heard, or perhaps I misread in one of the reports, that they even had to take out the pepper spray.
Yeah, somebody
Because that's
sprayed.
how rowdy this crowd.
But we can't ask the
Yeah, no,
question,
we
but.
can't.
It was a quick,
Just a quick spray.
that's what it said, it was
Just a
a,
spritz.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and this is kind of undisputed, so let's, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. The fight did occur. All right, now, we need to understand what what we would impose as a penalty for the fight. Again, you know, this is a different violation in the license than occurred in 2016. In 2016, we issued a letter of warning, which is generally what we do for a first violation, is we issue that letter of warning. So, you know,
But that was an underage drinking violation.
it was an underage, yes, an underage drinking violation, and we issued a letter of warning at that point. So yes, a different violation, but a violation nonetheless of the liquor license. So, what is the board's thoughts on this, on this?
Well, we haven't I don't think we've read Lieutenant Lannon's memo regarding the other disturbances and fights that that our police have been called to at this establishment, and
That is not what
That
this
is-
hearing is about tonight, though. That wasn't the subject of tonight's hearing. Yes, you're right.
I know, but that's concerning if there's that,
Yes.
frequency of fights breaking out at this establishment. I
True,
personally am
and that
concerned
can
by that.
be, yes, you're right, and that can be considered in the, as we talk about what we're gonna do about this now. But yes, you're right, there's been
I was just saying we
other
hadn't read
fights.
that into any of this public discussion yet. We've only talked about the underage violation in
Right,
2016.
right. Because that wasn't the subject of tonight's hearing,
Oh.
Mr. Chair, if I can at least read the guidelines that the commission has adopted. The commission has adopted these guidelines. A second offense within 60 months of the first offense, a 5 to 15-day suspension, revocation, or modification may also be imposed. However, it also states the commission may use its discretion in determining whether the facts surrounding a violation warrant a penalty which is more lenient or severe than those suggested by the guidelines.
Thank you. So, does anybody have a motion on what they feel would be, I can't make the motion, someone needs to make a motion. Further well, we need a
Unless you
motion.
want to pass the gavel.
You can pass the gavel.
I'm not passing the gavel. No one has any thoughts, or?
I mean, I think I take our regulations holistically. I think that all of our businesses should aspire to comply with all of them and not seek to violate any of them. I mean, I think it's extra disappointing when it's the same violation, or I should say when it's a violation for the same offense. But I think that, there should always be vigilance in making sure that no violation, period, occurs. So I understand that for the same offense, I would understand giving additional weight, but I will.
So you're saying because it's a different violation?
I don't.
A different
I
violation?
take that into account. I do think, though, then again, it's a second violation. It's not like, they've never been before us for fighting before. They have been before us for another violation that's within our regulations. This is a different violation, but it's still a second violation.
And to Selectman Keene's point, that it's been a problematic, the last few months, there's been multiple instances, although they're not the subject of this hearing tonight, it is fact,
The frustrating thing is that this started inside the establishment and spilled outside. That is the frustrating thing about this. I mean, it's geographically a small enough town that it shouldn't have happened, the second that there was a fight. Because you can't control, there could be a fight right now in our meeting. You can't control that, but what you can control is how you respond. And so it's unfortunate that it's spilled out, and it is a residential neighborhood.
But the response was they immediately closed the bar down. I mean, which is somewhat of the appropriate response, I would think. It was an immediate action that was taken
That's
to
true.
shut the establishment down and stop serving.
So do you consider that something to take into consideration for leniency, that there was still a violation, but some level of leniency because they acted appropriately when the incident occurred, or do you?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, it was something, that caused the termination of the evening, somewhat early, the
But
license.
do you feel as though that a penalty still should be enacted?
I think we need to do something. We've established that a violation occurred, and within our guidelines, we have some, guidelines of what we can do. We can issue a letter of warning that this was the first fighting violation that occurred at the establishment, and additional ones would be dealt with in a more harsh manner if it continues. We can provide some guidelines to the owner as to what they can do to try to prevent fights in the future, maybe hire additional staff, maybe hire trained security, or maybe have a police officer detail there on a busy night to try to prevent additional fighting. I mean, we have that.
The only thing with fighting is sometimes you just get lucky and nobody gets seriously hurt, but sometimes it's really bad, and that's the scary part.
I unfortunately didn't ask during the public hearing what kind of training or person is filling this role of bouncer at the door. I mean, if their job is currently to check IDs more than it is to manage the crowd, if you will, and kick people out who are
Yeah. Well, the only thing we
starting
heard was
to
that
cause a
they-
ruckus?
The only thing we heard, they were not tip certified. Only the
Right.
folks serving alcohol were tip certified, so.
So, I mean, well, I would like to see somehow in our response that the people who are working the door have more of a responsibility on management of the crowd than just carding IDs. And if they can't do both jobs, then there needs to be someone else who's, at least on crowded nights. I mean, if there's 5 people in the bar, maybe not, but on crowded nights, it seems like there should be someone overseeing the crowd and evicting people if they're
Okay, and
starting to cause a
it could also
problem.
be a capacity issue. I forget what the license,
Oh, yeah, that's
the
a good point,
capacity of the building is for the, or their license. Do we know how many are? Okay, well, so we can probably look into that too, but, so what is the pleasure of the board then? What do we want to do? Any,
Anybody make a motion?
yeah, let's make a motion.
Just for
to get-
discussion.
Yeah, let's make a
Oh,
motion to
we're
get things
supposed to
started.
discuss after the motion.
Let's make a motion to get things moving.
I mean,
All right, I would motion that I pass the gavel to Phil then.
I would think
You could just pass it, you don't
All right,
you don't need a
Phil, I'm
motion.
going to step down as chair of the licensing board, and I'm going to pass the gavel to you, since you already have it. And I will make a motion that we issue a written warning, a strongly written warning, requesting that this is a violation of our liquor license code, that a fight occurred on November 22nd, and that we would expect that, or require that training be applied to security personnel, or that a detail officer be hired during nights that we know there's, traditionally very busy, like the night before Thanksgiving. I'm not sure what other nights we can impose, but any nights where we expect a crowd to get to a point of 70 or more.
I think a scheduled party, reasonably anticipated nights maybe might be a term.
But then again, I mean, it could be 5 people in the place and the fight could break out, right?
Yeah,
So-
but we're trying to apply something for,
A more busier night, yeah. Okay, so my motion is that we issue a written warning that a violation has occurred, and that we are, that at this stage, no license suspension will be handed out, but if we are brought before us again on the next fight incident, that I would strongly urge that we issue a suspension of the license.
Of how many days?
But I would say that's
That's
not
up to a
proper
future
simply
board.
because you don't have a violation. You can't make a judgment today on a future violation.
No, I'm not.
I know that's
Yeah.
what, that's what
No, that's what I
Rosemary's
was
questioned.
asking.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't
Yeah.
put that. I'm just saying that this is the first violation of this section of the licensing law with the disturbance, and that a future one would be dealt with more
Appropriately.
Yeah.
So Selectman Valencourt has motioned that a strongly worded written letter be sent to, yes, so a strongly worded written letter be sent to the license holder, and that this motion contain a request for training of appropriate personnel, and that they schedule such appropriate personnel at evenings where they expect individuals, or the bar to reach a capacity that would require that type of oversight. Do I hear a second?
second.
Second made by Selectman Nobley. Any further discussion on this?
I agree to an extent with your recommendation. I think at the very least, I probably would have supported at least a one-day suspension. It's hard. I will go along with it, but I will state clearly, this happens again, I will not be as lenient. And I could tell by the look on your face, you don't want this to happen again. But fair warning, it won't be one day if I'm making the recommendation. Somebody could have been hurt. So I'm struggling because it's sort of and I think because of that, I don't want to speak for the board, that we're hesitant, but Ms. Carlson, next time, I will not be this lenient, and it'll be hard, and I'll pick days.
I agree with you. I would have probably supported a suspension, but I couldn't decide how many days, which is why I didn't want to make the motion. But I will also accept a strongly written warning with the caveat that next time I would definitely be looking for a suspension.
Well, we don't have to support the motion.
I know.
And I guess I guess that's the balancing act here, which is, on one hand, it feels like there should be a punitive component to this because of kind of the general atmosphere around it. But the other thing is, we're also trying to be constructive, which is we want this establishment to succeed. We want it to be a place where people are comfortable in the community. And those two are a little bit at odds, given what we're dealing with right here, which is, I think, to really make a decision that's outside of our guides, that's making us feel a little uncomfortable, that there should be some penalty that's associated with this happening because other events like this have transpired. But really more importantly, we need action that the establishment runs well and prevents this from happening in the future. That, to me, is more important, but so if anybody has another motion.
The only thing that I would add to it is that your camera equipment must be functioning, and you must preserve what you have regardless. That's on you. And so if that comes back again, I will be even harder. I'm just,
So we generally have 20 to 30 days of tape. Is that sufficient?
Well,
I
would think
honestly
in
don't
a-
know what's
I would
sufficient.
think in an event like that, you could set that aside. You'd somehow, you
Pull
retain
it.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Retain that tape for that event, so you would have that, evidence for yourself.
it's, again,
It protects everyone involved. I mean,
well,
that's
it's
not an
hard,
unreasonable
because
request
not
to
only
have.
could a patron get really hurt, or some of your staff, or a police officer. Somebody picks something up, and it could be catastrophic. So,
Can we be specific in our expectations of the amelioration of how this goes forward? In other words, within your motion, can we be specific?
You can make an amendment.
And add.
I'm okay with a friendly amendment.
well, I consider what I just said about the
Okay,
recording
so-
equipment as a friendly amendment.
So,
So
as an
motion.
amendment to, within the letter, it will be stressed that the tapes will be, in the event of any kind of an incident in the establishment, the tapes for that evening would be retained. We wouldn't just hear that, there are only 20 days and they've been erased. So it would be to everyone's advantage to retain those tapes.
That, we want to leave an expectation of that, too, that there, to Selectman Keene's comment, that there be some type of additional, to have Ross come back to us and explain to us the additional training that your staff went through. And then the third part, to Selectman Colagero's statement, that there be an agreement that if you have a special invite or particular evenings during the year, that there will be an added level of protection, or whatever you want to say, at the facility. And security, right. And that if there's a future violation, we will take into account those three items in particular.
But I think adding to the security, I think it would be, you probably already do this, I hope that you do that, when you're not there, and even if there's a minor incident, that your staff reports that to you, and you save that, just in case it's reported later on, or somebody gets hurt, or somebody gets in a car accident, whatever. So if there's even a hint or a whiff of an impropriety, that your staff is instructed to tell you, so you can preserve those documents.
Yes, very specific in that we do have an incident log, so anytime either somebody's shut off, somebody's put in a cab, anytime the police have been called, anytime there's an altercation, regardless of what happens, anytime there's something out of the normal course of business, there's an incident log, and they're very
Okay.
specific as far as what they need to write, because if something comes down the line 6 months later or 3 months later, you
Right.
can go back to that specific day and
Okay.
address it.
So we had a lot of suggestions made after that motion was on the table, and at no point did anybody
Lori's
actually
got it.
make
So
an amendment.
If I can summarize then, the motion is to issue a written warning, which would include the fact that a violation did occur, specifically a fight, the first violation of that type of an incident, and included in that letter would be an expectation that additional training for the staff, the security staff would be included, as well as a report back to this board at some date in the future, which we'd have to set after the letters, we'll set that in the letter was issued, that, how that training has occurred. And then the third was, Mr. Medeli's request that any tapes of any incidents that happened in the bar be preserved for evidence going forward.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to, because we're going to be the ones writing this letter and then seeking clarifications, that the second part, that the feedback from the license holder be within 60 days of the formal letter received. That way, it's very specific, and we're not having this discussion in March, April, May, or when the next incident occurs, and/or when the next incident occurs.
He'll take your friendly motion.
Okay, so that's the
Amendment.
motion on the table.
Second? No? Fresh second for?
Well, that's, I should say that's the original motion with the amendments included.
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Keen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. I will return the gavel to you. Not that you ever had it, but
No, but I'd like to take this time to thank Officer Driscoll and Officer Barta for your work and on your service to the town. And we understand it's a very difficult job, and you know, your safety is paramount to us, and we know that was a difficult night as well. So thank you for your service. You're dismissed. Thank you for hanging. I mean, you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but you're
Busy night.
We thank you for staying as long as you did. Okay. Okay, and I'm just going to announce that this matter is now complete, and the license holder will be notified with the letter. Okay. Next on the agenda is a request for Yashel LLC, doing business as Wine and Beer at the Andovers at 350 Winthrop Ave, for a transfer of all alcohol package store license. Let me just pull that up. I believe everything was in order. I believe this is a transfer from a current town business that we all know and love very much, going to a new ownership. Mr. Bugle, are you going to speak to this? Okay, well, if you want to, do you want to speak to this and clarify?
Not at all, I just wanted to say, okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, okay, we might be able to do that, but let's,
He's a football fan. He wants to get home to watch the second half of the game.
Oh, sorry, Ben.
okay, so this is transfer to a new ownership. Why don't you give us an overview, and then maybe the new owners can speak a little bit,
Right here.
okay? Maybe you can just introduce yourself to the board, and we can discuss, you know.
My name is Alpesh Patel, and I'm the partner of the Bill. He's also manager for the store, and I have a couple several stores I own in
He owns
Tewksbury
some
and
other stores as well, and as we all know, the industry's changing somewhat. So depending on what's happening in this state, with the way they're changing the laws as well, as you've seen in the paper recently, I think it might behoove us down the road to have multiple types of stores to kind of survive in this environment. So that's part of the plan. It's that simple, actually.
Okay. And all of the building department, fire department, and the police department have provided their letters of approval for this transfer, as well as the state, I believe. The license has been submitted to the state. So, any questions from the board? Comments? Warnings? Or
Bill already knows my warnings.
All too well, Rosemary.
well, it wouldn't hurt
And they're
to,
good warnings, by
new
the way.
ownership into the town, first time.
Okay,
business owners.
well, You cannot take out-of-state licenses as a form of ID. That's Massachusetts law.
Yeah.
So being a college town, you will get people from New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, whatever. Those are not a reliable form of ID.
Yeah, I
So
know.
having-
We have a store and we use the machine that.
So that was my second point. If you have a good, working, reliable scanner, we will take that into account, because if it passes the scanner, we would take that into account unless, and I always use this example, unless the person has a pacifier in their mouth, then we might not take that.
And to that
They need
point-
they need to look their age and also pass the test.
To your point, Ms. Mary, one of the rules they're thinking about changing, and I don't know if you read in the paper today, is they want to make out-of-state IDs acceptable now in this state. That's what the ABCC is looking at. I don't know if you saw that article.
Well, with all the fake IDs, I really hope that they do not do that. But they're good, the fake IDs, that you know better than I.
Believe me, it works.
So I'll finish this with fair warning, that you have been warned. So,
He's been coached, trust me.
okay.
And the other thing, I'm sure you've been coached to, but you obviously realize there's a college less than a mile away from your
Yeah.
establishment, so that's a big source for those fake IDs.
I have one store in Franklin, and store next to my store at the Dean College, and I have all the system over there. We
You
never
got the
sell
same
them.
one I have at Macklin. so
Macklin,
it's updated. so it's
upgraded
gonna
everything.
be Down there.
But now on the road, sometime in this when my other store, I have a machine. All right, we can check the card, but still is fact ID. The still machine recognizes regular ID. Their own machine is sometimes
But he's got to get updated on that.
upgraded.
I was going to say, yeah, they do need to be updated.
Mr. Chair, move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as licensing commissioners, approve the request of Yakshil LLC DBA Wine and Beer at the Andovers to transfer the alcohol package store license.
Okay, I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
You're all set. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck, both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is a request from Walgreens of Massachusetts LLC, doing business as Rite Aid, number 10117, 525 Turnpike Street, transfer of a wine and malt liquor license. Your name and...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Timothy Perry. I represent Walgreens in this transaction. I'm here for my colleague, Joe Devlin, who submitted all the paperwork, which I think you have in front of you. He's a city councilor up in Newburyport and is at a meeting like this there tonight. So I'm standing in for him. The manager of record will be Patrice Palmesi, who's with me here. She's been with the company for 17 years. And she can answer some of your questions if you have any. This is quite a large transaction, as you probably noticed. Walgreens is purchasing Rite Aid for $4.3 billion. They're taking over stores, many stores in Massachusetts and other states. So obviously this transaction has been vetted by the ABCC and other states. And so that paperwork's already all been submitted. What's before you is, I believe, all in order. So unless there's specific questions that you have, it's just a transfer without any other changes of the manager of record and of the license to Walgreens as part of this large transaction that's going on.
So will the name remain the same?
The name will remain the same for probably if history is our guide, it's about a 2 to 3 year process, because Walgreens will fill the prescriptions that are outstanding under the name Rite Aid. It usually takes about 2 to 3 years for that to occur.
Okay, thank you. I don't need any more than that.
So, just questions, Ms. Palmisi. When we originally licensed Rite Aid, we had some fairly strict regulations because of the college town, and you're literally adjacent to the college, where everybody was asked for ID regardless, and that only one register was allowed to sell alcohol. And I know from personal experience that happens, that was being enforced at all times. Is that, hopefully you're going to continue that practice? And
Yes, to my knowledge, I know that we're not doing anything different with, when we take over the Rite Aids. We're keeping everything status quo, management procedures and everything. It's more in regards to the prescriptions and, you know, how we're going to be training our folks in the policies and procedures.
But I guess the comment is you're still going to have that single register that would be allowed to sell alcohol, and only that register, and then everybody, I mean, literally, they card everybody.
Yes.
So, good.
Those policies are not going to change.
They're not going to change. Okay, great. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
Good luck. Okay, I believe that's our last item in licensing, so I'll hear a motion to move out of licensing.
Motion to move out of licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, with that being said, we are now hopscotch, well, actually, we have nothing to skip over because we took several items under consent out of order. And so we are moving on to item D, which is the special town meeting warrant. It's included in our packet. We will see, for anybody at home or here in the audience, if you visit the agenda, you will be able to access the full special town meeting warrant draft. And so the first item on the agenda this evening is to entertain a motion to open the warrant.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest maybe we take a 2-minute break while we wait for Selectman Smedili to get back? No, you want to continue forward?
I'm fine with that. I can't move forward with a motion anyways, so.
Intermission.
I will say, I will absolutely entertain that 2-minute recess if people want to use the restroom. Official recess. And so this section of the agenda, and I suppose just to clarify a question that was brought up. So what we have remaining on the agenda this evening is an opening, acceptance, and closing of the warrant, as well as any potential recommendations for articles in that warrant. Any recommendations would occur after we close the warrant, and at that point, prior to our recommendations, we will invite anybody in the audience this evening who would like to speak to any or all warrant articles to approach the podium and be brief and concise with their remarks. But again, I know that there was a question during that intermission about when that opportunity would be to speak, and I would anticipate within the next 5 minutes. So that being said, I would entertain a motion to open the warrant for our special town meeting.
Move that we open the warrant for special town meeting, January 30th, 2018.
Motion made by Selectman Nobley. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Valencourt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? What, let the record reflect that Selectman Smedili opposed. Motion carries with a 4-1 vote, unless no roll call is necessary for that. We then move on, next item of the agenda is the acceptance of the warrant. And so this would be an opportunity for members of the board to either accept the warrant as presented, or if changes are made, to make any such amendments at this point. Motion for those amendments, and we would just simply carry the same votes. We would vote on it the same way that we would any other issue on the agenda.
Motion to accept the warrant as published? Is that-
Selectman Nobley has made a motion to accept the warrant as published, or as presented.
As presented, sorry, presented, yes.
Do I
I'll
hear a
second.
Seconded by Selectman Keen. Any discussion?
I know that we are duty-bound to do this, but I still think there was a different solution that could have been made, so I will be a no vote again.
Any further discussion?
Duty bound, and
Yeah, sorry,
we're
what-
legally
could you-
bound.
I know.
We're legally bound
I
by the
use
state of
duty-bound.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm not criticizing the board for their vote. I'm just, was hoping for a different solution, but my withdrawal would be good.
And there has been no petition submitted.
No other further petitions, no.
Excellent. So motion is on the table, made by Selectman Nobley, seconded by Selectman Keen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Record show was 4-1 vote. We now have the option to close the warrant. So I would entertain a motion to
Mr. Chair,
close.
move the Board of Selectmen close the 2018 special town meeting warrant.
Second.
Motion made by Selectman Valencourt and seconded by Selectman Keen to close the 2018 special town meeting warrant. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No. And maybe that should have been an aye, because you closed it. but-
Okay, I was going to say, so
You're
before,
open it, but you're not going
So-
to
You
close
don't want to
it.
keep it open, I think
It's
I'll
either
take
aye
it.
or nay.
so to clarify, 4-1 or 5-0 vote?
Well, I'll say 5-0. Thank you
5-0
for the-
vote.
Thank you for
Thank you.
the correction. We don't want it just floating out there now, do we?
No.
And so before us, so that closes the town meeting warrant. So we have 6 articles before the Board of Selectmen this evening. Obviously, a well-attended audience, and so I would invite any members of the public, if they would like to weigh in about any, all, cherry-pick whichever articles that they would like to express any thoughts about. I would say that this is the time, as long as you're going to be respectful of everybody's time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Michael Connolly. I live at 41 Ray Street. I'm an anesthesiologist who subspecializes in the practice of pain medicine. In the context of that, it is one of my responsibilities to maintain awareness and compliance with both federal and state regulations of controlled substances. And it is in that regard that I would like to share with you the thoughts to the public that I shared with you earlier today.
Dr. Conley, could you just speak up a little bit?
Yes, sorry.
Sometimes the machines, it makes it a little
Yep.
hard to hear, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Dear members of the board, North Andover should not take any additional steps along the road to hosting the world's largest pot plant. 3 recent events should be alarming to anyone in favor of hosting the facility. On September 7th of 2017, Crimson Galleria in Cambridge filed suit in federal court in Boston, claiming damages as an abutter to a marijuana dispensary under the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, otherwise known as RICO. Their claim includes violation of the Controlled Substances Act. Importantly, the suit includes state and local officials in Cambridge and Boston, Cambridge and Georgetown, where the pot is grown, as necessary parties who are facilitating and encouraging violations of federal drug laws by licensing and permitting marijuana businesses. On January 4th of 2018, Attorney General Sessions, as was publicized last week, reestablished enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act. It is the mission of the Department of Justice to enforce the laws of the United States, and the previous issuance of guidance undermines the rule of law and the ability of our local, state, tribal, and federal law enforcement partners to carry out this mission. The following day, on January 5th of 2018, U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts issued a statement saying, in part, Our office will aggressively investigate and prosecute bulk cultivation and trafficking cases in those who use the federal banking system illegally. North Andover should have serious concerns. Any additional steps in the direction of hosting a pot plant could put the town directly in the crosshairs of the U.S. Attorney and anyone seeking relief from imposition of a plant that violates federal law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I would open the floor up if there's any individual that would like to speak. It's not really a formal line. The only request being that if you approach the podium, you please clearly state your name and address.
Ted Tripp, 262 Boston Street. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The current Osgood Properties has something like 70 to 75 businesses, some offices, some manufacturing, and some recreational that are currently there. And I just wonder if it becomes a pot-growing facility, how many of these might leave and how many jobs might be lost. We've heard there's a handful of companies that might come in here, but how many are actually going to leave? And we know some are going to be forced out because they cater to a younger crowd, for example, because of the 500-foot law that requires younger people have to be 500 feet removed from a marijuana growing area. So the laser tag company will be forced out, Community Theater of Andover, CrossFit will have to go, company called Platface Finger, and the Dance Network will all have to be forced out. And I don't know how many other companies are going to be gone. So I don't know if the applicants have done a study to see how many of their current companies that occupy the space are going to leave and how many jobs might be lost in North Andover. But if they haven't done it, I think perhaps somebody in the town, the planning board, or somebody should look into it, because it could be a significant loss of good-paying jobs. And the second question I had was, Selectman Nobley had told me a couple of months ago that the applicants for this special town meeting were paying the total cost of it, which I'm guessing is $15,000 or up. So can that be confirmed by the board, Mr. Nobley?
I can answer that. No, the town pays for town meeting.
The town pays for it, so
Yes,
the applicants...
There's no special interest groups paying for town meeting, because then that would deter people from filing citizen petitions, et cetera. So, no, the town pays for town meetings.
Okay, so that was incorrect information. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
My name is Karen Rashes, live at 115 Carlton Lane. I have never gone to a selectmen's meeting and questioned any process or town meeting that's been done in any community I've lived in. I'm new to North Andover. But I did have a few questions about this Article 6 that's on the warrant. And I guess I came here with a different expectation of what my questions were until after the presentation on this article, when it was said that even if the town meeting votes no, it seems that the Board of Selectmen still are pretty confident that they want to tell the town manager to enter into a host community agreement with the Valley Green Grow, Inc. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Or you have the
I think that if the
authority to-
town meeting approves the zoning change, because it would then allow the applicant to proceed with repurposing that site, yes, we would move forward with a host community agreement, but we have to make that vote.
But if town meeting voted no, would you still do that?
So it was actually a point of discussion, actually, about what exactly does a vote of no mean at town meeting. And that's one of the reasons why I think I can speak personally as one selectman that I don't really know how I'm supposed to read a no vote. Does that mean people aren't happy with what's being offered, or that people don't?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think she's referring to Article 4. If Article 4 fails, right, the zoning article,
Well,
if the zoning article fails...
then it renders everything moot.
And then you're asking if we would continue with Article 6 to vote if you confirm for Article 6.
Right, and I'm also looking at your agenda this evening that says that you would vote to authorize the town, you're going to take a vote to authorize the town manager to resume negotiations, and when he was explaining Article 6, you said even if there's a no vote, that the Board of Selectmen can still move forward with authorizing.
Article 6 is non-binding, so it doesn't need to be on town meeting's agenda. It is because of the signatures of several hundred people, but there's nothing, again, it's non-binding. So if people voted no, people voted yes. So one scenario is people vote yes, but again, it's not binding, so we still have to enter negotiations and treat it as we normally would.
Under the statute, the Board of Selectmen and the town manager have the right to negotiate a host agreement without approval of town meeting. This article was put on by the petitioner just to establish the town meeting. Well, my opinion, it was put on to establish the town meeting. If you're asking if the zoning article fails at town meeting, the main article, if it fails, there's absolutely no reason to continue with this host agreement, because there's not going to be a business there.
Okay, so that was one of my questions. If the town voted no on question 4 at the ballot, they voted no last year, and if they voted no this year, then you are not exercising any authority to
Oh,
then
no,
go do
because
your
there'd be
own thing.
nothing, there'd be no site. So I guess if they just wanted to pay us.
Okay.
And the vote to go forward with instructing the town manager to negotiate or to begin or continue negotiating, or I should resume negotiating, is just in preparation for town meeting. So we have that, we have something in place, or at least in process. So we have some indication of what that host agreement might be prior to town meeting. And that would be the vote tonight, to whether or not to allow the town manager to resume that negotiation.
And just to further clarify, even if the board votes tonight to authorize the town manager, and we get to January 30th and the vote fails, then everything just stops.
Okay.
Because there's nothing to continue.
Meaning the vote on Articles 4 and 5.
Right.
Yeah, or Article 4.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, or if that passes, yeah. So this was specifically, just to help the audience, so this was specifically ordered because in the event that Articles 1, if 1 were to pass, it would render the rest of town meeting essentially moot. So that's why it was ordered this way. And so let's hypothetically 1 and 2 fail, but 3 passes, and then if 4 were to fail, it would again render Article 6 moot anyways. So we wouldn't have a debate about a host community agreement if there was no site that was going to be able to be cited here.
Okay. So if everything passes and we do get to Article 6, I feel like Article 6 is vague as far as the numbers that are presented here, because people's eyes light up when they see, oh, the town can get X amount of dollars in revenue. So the question is, how did we get to the $3.5 million, and what's the documentation that backs up arriving at that number? Because it's referenced that's annual fees, approximately $3.5 million, covering items such as personal property taxes, host community fees, and other community-related expenses. Personal property taxes, I'm an assessor in another community, and personal property taxes are something that they would pay anyway. So I'm not sure why that's a benefit here, built in. And they are Valley Green Grow Inc., which means they're incorporated. And the only thing that's taxable at that point is machinery used in the conduct of business, because their inventory and their furniture and fixtures is now exempt under Mass law. If they say they're manufacturing corporations in Massachusetts pay no personal property tax. So I'd be concerned to say, how is that number arrived at? What's made up of that? What was the estimate that you used?
If I can, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
That's just the numbers that they threw out. They mean they could be used as a starting point, they could be used as a midpoint, they could be used as anything you might want, but they, in essence, being as blunt as I can, mean absolutely nothing to the negotiations that the town manager would enter if authorized by the Board of Selectmen. They are just numbers thrown out by the applicant.
But if I may.
Valley Grow Inc., they presented this article to us there is no, we don't have any basis or backing to this article. They presented this to us, and that's why we have been saying that this article is non-binding. If it is approved at town meeting, so we get through to Article 6, and we're voting on Article 6, it's non-binding. We don't have to abide by that. It's only what the applicants have suggested as their host agreement.
Except-
That is to be
but if-
negotiated.
I was going to say, and if I may too.
if I may first.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just going to clarify.
And I'm your boss.
I was just going to clarify, in a citizen petition article, we cannot change any language. We cannot change a word that's submitted in the
Understood.
petition. So this is the petition that was submitted with those numbers. The board can 100% or 80% disagree with those numbers, and we cannot change any word of a citizen petition. And that's the same for Articles 1 and 2. Those are citizen petitions. They must be published exactly as submitted.
So was there any conversation with the town manager or the Board of Selectmen discussing these numbers when it says on your agenda that they want to resume negotiations? So I would assume there was some conversation to come up with these numbers that were put in this article.
They had to come up with this, but part of the reason is that, just to address that, so the board, negotiations aren't currently occurring at all. There's no conversations occurring between the town manager and the applicant about a potential host community agreement. And so the vote later on tonight's agenda is whether or not we would like him to continue those or resume those conversations that were happening earlier this fall when the whole idea of this came up.
But-
You did have a question.
But yes, your point is well taken, that it's confusing to the public. They see this. They start thinking, oh, I'm going to get 3.5 million, maybe up to, not understanding how, you're the expert, how taxation is, how that money is distributed. It's up to, and as you said, they're obligated to pay their taxes just like everybody else, and any other fee that might be involved. And along with that, as I said earlier, when the robocall suggests this too, it's sending out a false message, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and I certainly hope unintentionally. It sends out a false message, gets everybody all excited, thinking we're going to be coming into a lot of money. And I think you're in the position to explain, as well as our town assessor, it doesn't work like that. There is residential, and then there's commercial, and people thinking they're going to get a tax break. It doesn't work like that, and it's complicated. So I am upset by the fact that these numbers go out, and people it gives them, it's a false message.
Well, it's unfortunate that if this is the language that's out there for us to vote on and use as a guide, that it's very deceptive or deceiving, and without documentation to say where that came from or that that's going to be what the final numbers are. I can tell you if there's a new value in personal property, it's taken as new growth. You know that new growth gets added to the levy. Personal property depreciates. It might start at one point and is added as growth to the levy in 1 year, and the next year that's picked up by the residential and commercial class. The town of North Andover, 87% of its residential. You shift and have a split tax rate, so you give them a little bit of a break. You go to 139% when you can go to the 150, and it changes it from 87% residential that they pay 83% of the budget. So when you add to the levy, it doesn't mean that the residential taxes are going to go down, because they're going to be paying a portion of that pie. I was the assessor in Saugus for 12 years. When Square One Mall came in, everybody was like, oh, look at all the new value that we're going to get. And a few years into it, the residential taxpayers are going, why didn't our taxes go down? It's because you're paying part of that growth that was added to the levy for the town to say where these numbers are coming from. My other question about the 1% of the gross cannabis-related revenue up to $1 million, because it seems like this is very rushed, trying to help the applicant meet deadlines for the state when the state hasn't even finished their regulations, is how do you plan on, or is there anything in place in our bylaw to audit and have the right to review the sales numbers? This sounds like it's not going to be a dispensary like in Georgetown. Georgetown has a posting on their website as of tomorrow. They're only taking cash. So it was only debit cards and cash before, but now it's a cash business. How do you monitor and audit a cash business, or what type of business?
how are we going to audit that potential 1% of their revenue that they're
You're
proposing?
pointing out things that will all be part, when we get there, of a host community agreement. It's not something that's going to be discussed in public. It's going to be done under the authority that the board and the town manager already have.
However, perhaps Karen, you could explain to us, so everybody thinks that there's going to be this big pot of money, and we're going to be doing this, that, and the other thing. When you divide that over all the taxes, whether it be commercial, residential, what type of relief or tax break will people get? I would say probably next to none.
Actually, I wouldn't want to step on the toes of the current assessor.
Yeah, I understand.
I was able to run some of the...
Today was her first day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Welcome aboard.
But I can tell you, generally speaking, that if the increased values in the commercial class, typically there would be a break to the commercial.
Exactly.
However, depends how much value gets added, because there could be it could change the percent. So the commercial rate could go up as opposed to go down. So then it affects all the commercial properties. It affects the small business owners as well as the larger business owners. It also depends upon if the town changes their percent shift.
The shift.
That's at the classification hearing every fall that you have. It depends if you spend to the levy. North Andover always spent to the levy limit and had no minimal capacity until 2014, and then you started having some capacity. Seems like your growth was down, so you started using some more of the capacity. This year, you had like $397,000 capacity that you could still spend before you reached your levy limit to be able to do that. But
It also depends on which host community agreement. Will it be medical or will it be recreational? But in layman's terms, and I'll try to, and I think the board knows this, so if you added, let's say, $3 million, it goes into the general fund, or being taxes, that would go into the commercial industrial base. So if we shift some of the residential over to the commercial industrial for them to carry it, it could be devastating to small businesses, the opposite effect of what we're trying to do for economic growth.
Right, the tax rate for the commercial, industrial, personal property rate could go up.
That's right. So they would take the brunt of, if we're trying to take the shift from, take residential burden and put it on the commercial industrial. It's very complicated. It's hard for people to understand. But it is not as simple as it seems, and it's not the windfall everybody's expecting. It isn't. And you need to study it, you need to pay attention.
If you go back to a question that was raised to Attorney Rosen during his presentation, the host community agreement, the reason it's non-binding at town meeting is that it does not contain any kind of a pilot. So it has no effect on the taxes or payment in lieu of taxes or whatever. This is strictly a host community agreement, similar to what we already have in place with several other places in North Andover, one that has been in effect now for close to 20-something years.
With Wheelabrator, I'm sure.
With Wheelabrator. So again, it has the taxes are not included as part of this agreement, thus there's no payment in lieu of tax program. Thus, that's why any discussion at town meeting would be a non-binding on the Board of Selectmen and the town manager.
However, the applicant is saying, and the article says, includes property taxes, fees, et cetera, and every tax-paying citizen in this town is obligated to the same thing. It's not a gift.
Right.
I mean, the 3.5 million is a large number, so even if you say, okay, how much of it were you expecting was allocated towards personal property taxes, because that's the first thing that you mentioned. Even if you felt 250,000 of it was to that, your commercial tax rate was 2134. That's $11.7 million in value to generate $250,000 in tax revenue. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the 3.5 million. So that's why I was saying, where does it come? Because if it's personal property tax, it comes into the general fund, and the citizens have the right to appropriate that at town meeting. Right. If it's a gift of money and it doesn't get put into the general fund, the selectmen get to spend that, and it's the right of
deciding how that money is spent is taken away from the town meeting. So it's how is that money being given? And if you can't discuss a host agreement, then I think it's unfair to have these numbers in this article.
I agree.
because
I would
it's very
also, I would
misleading.
also refresh you
We
back
did not-
to
we did
Selectman
not-
Valencourt's
I understand.
comments about what his belief
didn't-
was, why this
Mm-hmm.
was introduced.
And as the assistant town manager said, we can't change the wording.
Absolutely.
The wording is the wording. We can only try to, and thank you for educating everybody tonight on some of this information. That's all we can do, right? We can just educate people on it, and then, you know, this, and what we've been clear about all night is that this is not the host agreement that we would probably be entering into. It may be a starting point, it may be a negotiating point, but this is non-binding, even if it's voted in at town meeting. It's not what we would, you know, it's not the end product.
And that point will be made very clear to all the citizens that show up to vote.
And ma'am, as you said, you have every right to approach the microphone at town meeting and say everything that you've
Well,
already said.
I would have 3 minutes, and you clearly can understand it's a complex conversation to have, and it
That's
wouldn't be
true.
covered in 3 minutes. And I think, in fairness, if the Board of Selectmen were wanting to be educating the citizens about what they were voting on, that there's some responsibility on you to present some type of information about that and not rely on me having a 3-minute or someone else having a 3-minute explanation to that, because it's a very complex discussion.
And also, the extra $1 million is also based upon, I believe, the amount of sales and the generation. So then we also don't know, is this facility going to be built in steps? So that you might just start out with the medical marijuana and the research, and that might only be 50,000 square feet out of the 1.1 million square feet. So that there wouldn't be much involved in that.
Right.
So it's extremely complicated. Again, everyone needs to keep a mindful eye of actually what we would get,
Right.
and not what sounds good.
Exactly. I mean, Georgetown, in their host agreement, they had that the town was going to get a certain dollar amount, provided they were the only game in town. And now that they have a marijuana growing facility, that there's another company that wants to come in. So now all of a sudden, the existing company says, now I don't have to pay you. Well, the agreement said, now I only have to pay you half of what I told you I was going to pay. So, you know, open one store, another store follows, and now it cuts the revenue based on the host agreement. So I'm sure that the town manager is capable of negotiating a host agreement, but I'm just not sure that it's the right thing that we should be doing in such a rushed fashion when the state of Massachusetts hasn't even finished listening to people and finished their
Cannabis
rules and
control,
regulations. The Mass Municipal Association, you're all members of, I'm assuming, has the guidelines on their website, and they're still taking public comment until the middle of February, before they have their March 15th deadline. But yet we're having a town meeting before the public's even finished commenting on the state's regulations.
But that was set by the applicant.
It was set by the
We didn't have an
applicant,
option on
fine.
that,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, David Teresi, 67 Settlers Road. Just to dovetail on what the young lady just said, I think Article 6, we all know, and I think Dick, you alluded to it, it's a Trojan horse. It got them in the door, it got them to get the town meeting. We all know that. That was their right to do it, they did it. But I need to take exception to what the chairman of the planning board said earlier. To say that we got to throw up our hands and say, we got to do it because they called a meeting, that's just not fundamentally accurate. The planning board had every opportunity to stop this. And at the end of the day, you know, we can say they called the town meeting, but the planning board owns these articles. They submitted them, they're on the warrant right now. You know, I listened to the chairman of the planning board talk last week and said, well, I think he said the same thing tonight, actually. Well, they would have submitted it anyways. And I said, well, let them submit it. So what would have happened? Tonight, they would have showed up with 200 signatures with the same article. You folks would have had 14 days to send it to the planning board. By law, the planning board would have had 65 days to call a public hearing. So they could have run off the clock on town meeting if they chose to do so. So if the planning board's in favor of it, that's fine. They just need to own up to it. And that's one thing I really want. I don't need to get into all the details of the proposal. And I think Article 6, whatever it is, it's just like Article 10 from last May. It'll probably be withdrawn because it has no merit. But the planning board articles that these folks need are planning board articles. They own them, and the people of the town should know that they own them. Thank you.
Any additional public comment on this?
Hi, my name is Ann Gleason. I live at 28 Brad Street Road. I spoke to the board in October. I commented on my role as a healthcare provider in the state, as a mother of a young woman who identifies as an addict, and as an addiction counselor. I just wanted to let you know that I get various Facebook things, and I have right here from Osgood Revitalization Coalition, North Andover, home of the future of medicine. I find that very misleading. I don't, from what the attorney just said tonight, what they plan on using, how much square footage for actual medical research, I don't think it's fair to represent this as this new age, you know, the new forward progress of what this company really plans to do. We all know what it really plans to do. And I'm just really tired of people pretending and saying that it's going to be about medical research. It's not. So tell the truth. I'm really tired of being the only person in the room telling the truth. And yesterday morning on CBS Sunday Morning, there was quite an article about marijuana in Colorado, and there was a young woman there, well, maybe not so young, maybe middle-aged, and she claimed that she was a heroin addict, and she used marijuana to kick her heroin addiction. And I just want to tell you, as a drug counselor, that is absolute hogwash. Nobody ever thinks that you can kick heroin by using marijuana. So when people tell you that this is one of the reasons that why we want to grow marijuana in North Andover to help the opiate crisis, that's a fallacy. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience?
Carl Rapucci, 14 Buckland Road. My background is in chemistry. I have a degree from Merrimack College, bachelor's degree, and I have my name on a couple of patents for drug delivery systems, intranasal delivery, skin delivery, and stuff like this. I've worked with compounds that are safe, something that might be out of a plant that's in Bombay Gin. It's also used in Dunkin' Donuts and stuff like this. But for the FDA to allow us to use that, even though the chemistry was absolutely simple in how it breaks down and how safe it was, textbook-wise, we had to prove it. We had to prove, and they made us jump through hoops to do this. Now, you're talking about a compound that we use as what they call a delivery-enhancing compound. And what it does is when you formulate it right with the right drug, you can deliver it through the skin or through the nasal passages, whatever. This particular compound was developed like maybe 10 years before I got to it. I get to it. I happen to be part of an invention that we could deliver insulin this way through the nasal passages. Another company picked it up. We didn't get very far with ours. There was problems in the clinical trials and things like this. We made it with another gentleman came in and said, hey, I'd like to use your formulation with a different drug for a different indication. That's another thing. You need an indication. You need a drug. Combination of drug, whatever. But the thing is, that one worked. And that guy, so here you have a set of chemists that developed a compound to enhance the drug delivery. Those guys are gone. Another set of chemists like myself and a few guys, you're talking a handful of people, 3 or 4 guys working in a lab. That's it. And maybe an accountant and a few people pulling in money. The money comes from warrants, maybe trickle down wherever it comes from. We're not selling any product, but it takes that much time. It takes us maybe 10 years. Those guys get the actual formulation, the people that we license it to, they get the formulation. It has taken them, not with us. Our company that we work for is gone. They're on their own out in New York. The product will hit the market in the second quarter of 2018, but it has taken tons of time. And you're talking about a specific drug, a specific formulation. So now, and all the hoops that we have to go through the FDA. So now here what you're going to have is 400 something, or maybe 100 different strains of plants that you're going to give to people, allow them to smoke it, or whatever, recreationally or anything, and not have any kind of safety concern. That doesn't make any sense, even if the papers, and there's all kinds of papers out there. Pfizer had to kill Exubera with insulin going into the lungs because of particle size. That was a problem. We had a formulation going to the nasal passage. 3% of it was oil. They made us jump through hoops to show that the oil doesn't get into your lungs. Now you're going to have this type of research going on. Even if they make the plants, you have to isolate compounds. Maybe there's 400, maybe there's 80, right? There's THC. There might be various groups out of there. There's different receptors in the brain and different receptors in the body. All these things have to be tested. But to say it's going to be medicinal use and just a turnkey, plant it, grow it, it's good, no way. I don't see that. And if it's happening in Colorado or Washington, I mean, I just don't see the science behind it, truly, even after reading many different articles about it. The work that we have to do in order to get something made and produced and into people is a huge undertaking. And you're talking millions of dollars of insurance because you have to do clinical trials. You start off with 30 people, you go up to 100, they want thousands, tens of thousands. So a little company like we were, this, unknown type companies, you think you're going to go to a Pfizer or an Allergan and say, hey, look at what we did. It goes into an animal, great, or it does this thing for an indication. Hey, they want to see numbers, and they want to see people, thousands of them, to show that it's safe, efficacious, and you have to have a target indication. So whatever indication that they're looking at, whether it's something in oncology, whether it's Alzheimer's, look at Pfizer. Pfizer just laid off 300 people. And they were way far ahead with Alzheimer's and some other things. And then, it's just not, to me, I could see them selling something for recreational use. Maybe it goes far, but even then, you know what happens at a high school, right? There's a high school prom or something like this. We've had it here in North Andover, right? Somebody gets sick because somebody brought something in. So you have to have unbelievable controls. And the science isn't even truly there, not entirely anyway, even for detection, even for police officers. Mm-hmm. You're worried about an alcohol thing. Imagine something like that happening. Somebody's on marijuana. How are you going to detect that? With what? I mean, I'm sure they're working on it. There's people working on all kinds of things. But nothing's 100%. It's just not there. So just my experience in pharmaceutical companies, I've worked for two. I've been at two major ones for over 10 years, and then the last one that I was at over 10 years, we have the patents and stuff like that. But it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of safety, a lot of things have to go into medical anything, all right?
So you're not only speaking out against this, but you're also against the entire medical marijuana industry. You feel it's not the right move. So you're not just concentrating on this, but you're also, in general, you're saying that legalization in the state of Massachusetts wasn't right and it wasn't well thought out.
Right. If you're going to use it for medical purposes, you have to follow the lines through any medicine, okay? So, you take aspirin today, it comes from willow bark. You're not planting more trees to try to do it a different way. It's a done deal. But for medical marijuana, what you're looking at is something, from what I've read, anywhere between maybe 80 compounds, maybe 400, something like this. But like THC is the thing that makes you feel high. But there's endogenous receptors, things in your mind that allow this drug to work. Then you have to have other things. There has to be a key.
I mean, we got all that.
Okay,
You're kind of going over it. And we appreciate that, but my question was, in general, medical marijuana, you're against medical marijuana altogether in the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You're going to have to work on that 3 minutes. You get double?
You could convince the town moderator.
Good evening. My name's Tom Duggan. I live at Beacon Hill Boulevard. I'll be brief because the hour is late. I think my question tonight for the Board of Selectmen is to the question of economic development. In particular at this site, for a number of years, the site has been banded as a great opportunity for the town to do something with, generate additional tax revenue. As many of you recall, a well-publicized proposal was submitted to Amazon with promises of tax revenue, of jobs, tax credits, and millions of dollars in infrastructure. And to the point that select persons immediately brought up, there was really no public discussion of where those basis of numbers came from in that proposal. No transparency, no public debate prior to that being released. So in the spirit of transparency and the spirit of informing our residents prior to the meeting, I would ask that the Board of Selectmen consider or request that the Board of Selectmen have the town manager provide any analysis that was done through his negotiations with the parties prior to today about the economic development associated with it, the tax revenue, and possibly have that be provided to the Finance Committee, which is, again, another independent third party that represents the citizens' views, and have them opine upon it as well, so that going into town meeting, we can have some clarity, we can have facts in front of us as to what really are the tax revenues, fees, and other benefits, monetary, not social or cultural or things like that, but have a clear statement of fact. So I would ask that you, the Board of Selectmen, please consider directing the town manager to surrender those documents, make his negotiations prior to take public, and any facts associated with those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duggan.
Lynn Radnicki, 32 Marblehead Street. A little bit weird being on the side of the stand, but couple comments to the Board of Selectmen. One being Amazon, the second headquarters, that's still pending out there. I believe the selectmen spent tens of thousands of dollars on that. Has any response been given yet? Any
There was no
questions on
planned
that?
response until March of 2018.
2018, okay.
That's the response that Amazon will give to whoever they
Okay.
accept.
And if the Board of Selectmen feel this is the best use for the site as a medical and recreational research and development site for marijuana, why did the Board of Selectmen spend money on the Amazon bid? This was in the
So
queue
this-
for almost 2 years now.
A unique opportunity. Well, I guess I can't speak on behalf of the town manager. I can say as a selectman, I support that decision because there were 5 communities in the Merrimack Valley that bandied together and identified a site in North Andover as being potentially viable. I mean, they would have had a hoop, they meaning Amazon would have had to jump through hoops locally when it comes to zoning,
Right.
permits, et cetera. But, I
So
mean, I
you
think that
personally felt that was a better proposal than medical and recreational marijuana?
as
for the site?
unlikely as it is, if it were possible, I would see a lot of appeal to having Amazon, or at least some of Amazon here.
They were talking 30,000 jobs as
Right.
opposed to whatever.
So we're
Of
settling.
course, but, I mean, that's,
We're
in my
settling.
opinion, it's a very, small percent. I mean, I'd love to see it come here, believe me, I'd love to see that come here, but I think
We
with.
might not get there, but we might get something in between. I would ask that the Board of Selectmen, unless they are 100% in favor of having recreational, we already have a medical marijuana overlay district. We are not restricting anybody's rights to have medical marijuana. They can get it driven here, we have a district, it could go in a year and a half ago. Yeah. That you hold off your recommendations to town meeting on these warrant articles. And I'd also say that you should hold off your recommendation to allow the town manager to negotiate. You're losing your leverage. The longer you wait, the more leverage you have. There's an April 1st deadline. Common business. You're losing your leverage. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Peterson. I'm at 684 Mass Ave. Just had one question, and depending on the answer, a comment. Is there a situation where you would vote to not authorize the town manager to start negotiations, and then the town in an underrepresentative special town meeting authorizes the planning change and still stop the a community agreement?
I'm not sure I'm following you, I'm sorry. Say
Is
that
there-
again, please.
Is there a scenario where you do not allow the town manager to enter negotiations on a community agreement, but the town in an underrepresented town meeting votes to agree to the planning change, is there a situation
The
where that-
planning board change.
The planning board change, right. Is there a possible result where that would stop the project?
Well, they need, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, we've got a lot of experts in the room, they need a letter of non-opposition. So there's still.
And they need to go through the state process.
They need to go, so there's still time for the host community agreement.
Yeah, I think your question was if the town votes no on Article 6, are we then stuck without one? Is that your question?
My question is, if the town votes to allow the zoning change.
Right.
But you.
But we say no on.
But you withhold on the community agreement, does that stop the project?
No.
Well,
Not
if we chose to, yes, because I would assume that as a board, we would not release the one bit of leverage we have, which is signing a letter of non-opposition without a host community
Yeah.
agreement. So if the town approves it, I would think that we would, as a board.
But I
at that
think the
point,
answer to the question is actually,
we have to vote as a board, but
you can allow the project to proceed without a host community. So 4 passes, see if I can figure this out. 4 passes, and for some reason, the Board of Selectmen say, go ahead, but we don't want a host community agreement. Can that happen? Sure.
that's not
Right.
right.
Then
The
there'll be a-
probability?
And then there'll be a recall election.
But the point is, it doesn't matter how people vote on Article 6, because we're authorized, we can authorize the town manager to enter into a host community agreement regardless of how the vote is on 6.
Right. So can
That's
you-
not necessary.
So can you withhold that permission and prevent the entire project completely?
The letter of
We can withhold the
non-opposition
letter of
can.
non-opposition.
Okay. So I would ask that you would do that. I've lived in North Andover for 9 years. This is the town I married my wife, raised my children. I can say if I was 9 years ago now, and North Andover was the home of one of the largest growing facilities, I would not look to North Andover to raise my family. And I don't know how many other people would do the same, and what would that do to property taxes and
I
property
have heard
values.
that from several citizens, that they would not have moved here or they would move out.
Thank you very much.
Okay. See somebody getting up?
Kelly Cormier, 169 Andover Street. Just to echo the sentiment that came, my husband and I moved here to raise our family. Wouldn't have done it if it was the largest grow facility. We wouldn't be here.
Andover Street.
169 Andover.
Kathleen Sullivan, 128 Martin Avenue. One of the previous articles was about the Atkinson School, which I live right down the street from, and everybody's concerned about the crosswalks for their children. I mean, we want those crosswalks for our kids, but we're going to bring this into our town? I have 4 boys in this community. I have a 22-year-old, and I have a 9-year-old. And to think that this is what we want for our kids? But we gotta have that sidewalk because they gotta get to school. Are we kidding? I don't get up and talk in front of people, it's not my thing. But I feel very passionate about this. To have a 22-year-old son that might go out there and take those drugs, we don't know the effects of their brains are not fully developed at 22. And to make a bad decision, we talked about the fighting in the parking lot. And we're concerned that maybe somebody could have gotten hurt, a police officer could have gotten hurt. What if my son was at a party and somebody offered him some pot? I just think, I have a senior in high school. I am concerned about him going away to college. And I don't know, I really do have a problem. This is North Andover. I've been here for 20 years. I love this town. But this is not my town that would want a community that would support the largest, it's not just, a corner store. This is the biggest facility. So we would be known as having Wheelabrator and Pot. So 2 trash facilities in our town? Is that what we want? I really hope that you would consider that. I know you all have children in this community, most of you.
My concern is that the adults of North Andover put a big rubber stamp that we think a controlled substance known as marijuana is a good recreation. That's the message. Maybe the kids can't get it. They all will, but you've just told them. But we, the grown-ups, think it's okay.
Right. And we are putting money that Like, again, these robocalls, which I did not know that before I came here, and I wish this meeting was in the high school, because there has been so much information that I did not know coming in here tonight.
But we
And
don't
it's-
have the
it's-
money to get the message out like the applicant. They have a lot of money where they can do the robocalls.
But you are the Board of
literature-
Selectmen.
but-
You know that. You know that. We don't. We
I
are the
understand.
average citizen trying to raise these children to be good, upright citizens who might want to someday be on a Board of Selectmen. But if they're home smoking pot, guess what? They're not going to be those stars, those shining stars that are going to want to participate in our government. And if you have a daughter, you're not going to want one of your daughters marrying my son if he's high on pot, because he's not going to be able to support your family. And maybe she can, but does she want a husband who's just going to be sitting around
Well,
smoking pot
no,
all
because when
day?
she has children, they're now finding THC in the newborn babies because of the exposure to, and don't know the effects of that now. There's so much, we could go on all night, but people want to go home and go to bed.
That's the thing. We're rushing. We do not know all the facts of how this is going to affect our children and their systems in this community. And it's unfortunate. I think that we're
Infertility
rushing.
is being proven for young males who smoke excessively. They later in life have an infertility problem. What kind of a legacy is that?
Well, we've already found that these phones affect our children detrimentally, right? That they're not going out and, or that their self-esteem, their self-worth, they've got problems because they're constantly on the phone. They're looking at Facebook. They're looking at Facebook and Snapchat because, and they're comparing themselves. So they're already maybe with a lower self-esteem, and then they're going to go out and maybe say, well, I need to have some pot so that I can, maybe chill and, I don't know, feel better about myself. Is that what we want for our kids? I hope not. Just wanted to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Seeing nobody else in line, I will move forward with entertaining recommended actions. And again, for the public and for folks at home, the decisions made by the Board of Selectmen about recommended actions actually, again, are also not binding. This is ultimately the decision made at town meeting. So in case anybody thinks that we are voting tonight to approve or not approve, it is, of course, town meeting that approves or pushes against these 6 articles.
Which I support because I think, as it's made clear, we need more time to study this. I think that there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. So I think that's appropriate that we wait till town meeting.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you just said?
I was saying that the decisions made by the Board of Selectmen tonight, we are not voting tonight to approve marijuana in this town. We are not voting tonight to approve a host community agreement in this town, and we are not voting tonight to prohibit marijuana in this town. And this is simply whether or not the board wants to weigh in on any or all of the 6 articles so that it would appear in the book when you accept the warrant at town meeting. It would say beneath that each article how the planning board, Board of Selectmen, and I think in all instances or some instances the finance committee. No instances. Okay. And so that being said, so we have 6 articles before us. We are into section E of the agenda. I would say Article 1, if we want to entertain a motion to recommend a certain action on that article.
God bless you.
I would note that that is in direct conflict with Article 3, which this board is presenting to the special town meeting.
I will make a motion to recommend unfavorable action on Article 1.
Motion made by Selectman Keen. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any discussion on the motion to recommend unfavorable action on Article 1? Hearing none, all in favor?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if we vote favorable action on Article 1, it kind of cuts the legs out of everything else, right? It kind of destroys everything else.
But then again, you can wait and make your decision later on after you have more time to study it.
I guess I look at the goat. Listen, we've been talking about this since last May. And there are folks who spend a lot of time on this, and I appreciate that, from the folks that are sitting on boards to the folks that are sitting out here today, to the folks in the community. The fact of the matter is, there's been dozens of meetings, thousands of pages to look at, review, and all sorts of investigation that we can do on our own independently on the internet about home values, about addiction rates, about usage rates. I think we're at a point where we can, my sense is, as a board, we have enough information to make this decision. I don't know what we're going to hear in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's going to be radically different than what we've heard over the past 6 to 8 months in terms of this first article. In terms of this first article.
So what you're saying is that you support recreational marijuana?
This is the general bylaw. Just to clarify, this is not what the planning board zoning bylaw changes. Article 1 is the citizen petition to prohibit all forms of marijuana, which this board had discussed previously, and that includes research within the boundaries of North Andover.
That's what the
I mean, I
article
made the
talks
motion
about.
because we already discussed
We
this.
have already
Right,
voted on
we've
this.
already,
Essentially, we voted on what we submitted Article 3.
right.
Motion made and seconded to recommend unfavorable action on this article. All in favor? Aye. And an aye vote is recommending unfavorable action. All opposed?
Aye.
4-1, unfavorable action, Article 1. Article 2 is a citizen petition. It recommends a similar prohibition through the zoning bylaw. Do I hear a motion for Article 2?
Just give me a chance to.
I'll move unfavorable
Motion made by Selectman Keen
action, recommendation.
for unfavorable action on Article 2,
Second.
seconded by Selectman Nobley. Do I hear discussion?
Obviously, I do not support this motion.
Hearing none. That's not the right. So, any further discussion? All in favor of unfavorable action on Article 2, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
4-1. Article 3 reflects votes of this Board of Selectmen that would allow our general bylaw to prohibit storefront retail sales, but allow for the option of cultivation or research. It reflects votes taken by this board following public discussions earlier this fall. This is the article based on those votes that was drafted and presented as the Selectmen's article. So do I hear a motion one way or another?
Move for favorable action on Article 3.
Motion made by Selectman Nobley for favorable action on Article 3,
Second.
seconded by Selectman Keen. Any discussion?
I guess I just want to reinforce that if you go back to the tape and the discussion we had here about this article, our focus was, and I think continues to be, that there is not tolerance in this community for retail distribution of any way, notwithstanding Rosemary's consideration of another way to get around that. That's something that, I know for myself, and I think probably the rest of the board feels the same way. We're very clear as to specifically the type of uses we want here because of the message it does send. And I think that's the other part of this, which is there are many elements in this world that have good and bad applications. The reality is we've had somebody up here who, who's involved in this industry very, very deeply and has seen the value of that. We've heard stories on both sides, and the reality is that this is an opportunity. It's for us as a town to define how cannabis is used in this community, and it's really up to us to message it forward. And I think by establishing it and identifying that we are not in favor of retail sends a very strong message. It gives us an opportunity to explain why we don't want retail, and it allows us to also explain why we think the research piece and the medical opportunities are clear.
I would make an amendment to include what we discussed this evening that the applicant has not addressed, which is the service delivery. I think you described it as the ice cream truck of of marijuana, I would offer an amendment that that also be included to this list.
Isn't that just retail? That's retail.
No, it's not.
With
Well,
all.
of course, we didn't say it wasn't retail.
With all due respect, I have to ask town council to clarify, we've already closed the warrant.
Can't close the
Yeah.
warrant.
I would say that that would be retail. So retail would, a license.
You would
for-
say, but do you know that for a fact from the regulations
Wait,
that that's called?
One moment, it's two different questions. It's a moot discussion. We voted to close the warrant.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
So we would not be able to, we wouldn't be able to accept an amendment like that unless we presented it at town meeting, correct?
Correct.
Or we reopen the
Our vote to
But
reopen
can
the
we just
warrant.
understand that would be retail?
It's not.
Suzanne?
Just for our future
I'm sorry.
knowledge?
I'm sorry, what did
It's
you
not.
say?
Can we just understand for our future knowledge if that would indeed be retail? A delivery
So,
company?
But it wouldn't be from them, it comes from the outside. They have the retail business, as you're calling it, or the delivery business.
So you're talking about home delivery of
Yes.
medical or recreational, okay, I'm just
Yes.
clarifying. Home delivery of medical or recreational marijuana into North Andover from another entity. So, and the source of that being North Andover potentially, right, being the facility on 60.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's what I think Selectman Smedili is suggesting, is that it's a loophole.
That a driver
It
from
gets
Haverhill or
sold to
Georgetown
another-
couldn't come to North Andover and deliver.
From a delivery service, yes. Company.
Outside of North Andover?
Outside of North Andover. They pick up the product here.
But if they
But
have
how
a
do you
license.
police that? How do you stop that?
That's my point
I
exactly.
mean, you don't know that's happening.
so I would suggest that there are regulations that the Cannabis Commission is looking at right now. They're draft regulations that we don't really have the answer to that. I think logically what we would say.
There you go.
Excuse me.
So, this,
So I would say that in terms, if you look at what retail is retail is dispensing to a customer, that's part of the definition. If what you're discussing is a delivery and a purchase, a sale from a commercial enterprise to a customer, that would fall within a retail. And
But you don't know for sure.
I did say that I do not know, excuse me, I do not know for sure, and that the Cannabis Commission is looking at those regulations now.
Excuse me,
Hey, well,
excuse me, Mr.
well-
Connolly, or Dr. Connolly. We're in an open meeting. Okay.
But just to close on that, I mean, that would fall under marijuana retail, which, I mean, if it was retail, if we did confirm it was retail, which would be prohibited under this article. Potential, right? I mean.
Or the fact that we have a regular town meeting coming
Again,
up,
we
and
don't
if
know
it
for
clarifies
sure.
that we find that this falls into a loophole.
It's a new scenario.
But we're going to
that
vote
was-
on it anyways.
There was a new scenario that was just brought up tonight, though, I mean, really.
That's the whole point, Vicki.
So, and I know that everybody's upset by everything I'm saying, but all I'm saying is what I think the law is, and that they're draft regulations, that we will find out what is going to be defined more clearly when the Cannabis Control Commission
And when will those
issues
draft
reg-
regulations come out?
So the,
The drafts are already out.
The drafts are out.
I know it is.
So when will they vote on that?
I believe they're voting on it in March.
There you go.
So,
After town meeting. But it's not rushed.
So is there a problem with banning all of these categories in this town meeting in January? And then in March, if some new thing comes out, we go in the May town meeting and say we want to add another ban. We don't like this.
exactly.
Came out in March.
Because you were against a
I mean, because
special
we
town
have
meeting
this town
anyways.
meeting, why don't we take the opportunity to ban what we can if we want to, right now?
well, isn't the flip side of that, you know, you could have a citizen petition and say, we want retail. I mean, you mean, there are lots of scenarios going ahead that nothing is fixed in that sense. The decision we're trying to make here is one that's prudent within the knowledge that we have.
And what happens on April 1st if we didn't meet that deadline that we've been warned by Mr. Salisbury and other town councils from other communities telling everyone to get it under that April 1st deadline? We wait till the May town meeting?
Again, they're competing, so under normal circumstances, we wouldn't even be having a special town meeting right now. And so we would be, under that scenario, open to exposure no matter what. And we'd already discussed earlier this evening about our positions regarding a special town meeting. Why wouldn't we move forward with banning what we can ban right now if that's our position? And then move forward with banning anything additional if this, I shouldn't say unanticipated, but,
That scenario.
yeah, the concern of people driving into this community and making home deliveries actually came to fruition.
So what are our options with this then? I mean, right now, there's a motion on the floor for
Mhm.
favorable action, which would prohibit retail sales and also craft cultivators. What would you prefer us to do? mean, what
I
would you-
understand Regina's point. I do. Is to ban this now while we can, but I think, again, it sends the wrong message. But I probably will vote for it because I think we do need to do that. I think that's hugely important. But it's frustrating that we're rushing. We don't have the information, and I think everybody is in agreement with that, but we proceed.
Well, in fairness, we've been chastised from both sides
I agree.
for not moving quickly enough. In fact, we were chastised by opponents of this back in October for not moving quickly enough.
I understand.
So, anyways, there was a motion on the table, it's been seconded. I will call, for hearing no further discussion, I will call a vote. All in favor of recommending favorable action on Article 3, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I, even though I've made my point that I feel as though it's incomplete, but I do feel as though I have an obligation to protect the town.
Article 4 is one of the, presented by the chairman of the planning board, Mr. Simons, earlier this evening. It is the amendment to the town of North Andover zoning bylaw to replace section 8.13, temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments, with this brand new section that the planning board is still in the public hearing process of reviewing. And so, again, the options before us are not just favorable or unfavorable action. We could choose to take no action. We could choose to wait until a later meeting date. It is.
Yeah, I would motion no action on this because it is in the public hearing process, and there could be changes to this article prior to town meeting. So-
May I
Then are
respect-
you voting, are you saying
I was
take no
gonna say-
action or to make a recommendation at town meeting?
Good clarification.
Yeah, the fourth option is for the recommendation to be made at town meeting. And as you heard from
Or we
Mr.
could do it
Simons,
on our next meeting, too.
well, as you heard from Mr. Simons, they're not going to take a vote till the 23rd. Your next meeting is on the 22nd. Our practice is that we hold a selectmen's meeting right before town meeting for any final votes that are necessary. That's typically what is done when the board, in order for publication, recommends to be made at town meeting.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion that we make our recommendation at town meeting after the public hearing process and the planning board has had a chance to change or amend the article in any way.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Selectman Valencourt, seconded by Selectman Keen. Any further discussion?
I think that's probably a prudent path. What's encouraging to hear is that, and I've attended a number of the meetings of the planning board, they've spent a lot of time really going through line by line, working with Counsel Egan. I think it's a very well-crafted article, and it gives people a very clear picture as to what the implementation would look like if you support it, and if you don't support it, what you're opposing from a zoning standpoint. And I appreciate that. I think it's probably good to say, have that one final check with the public comment, so.
Three. We've not missed any, correct?
Right.
Simons, all three are still to be had?
Yeah. I think that makes sense, but it's very clear that we're near a finished product, so I'm encouraged that we'll be able to make a recommendation so that folks attending the town meeting know where we stand as selectmen.
I think it's prudent not to make a vote on anything that we don't know what the final looks like.
Yeah.
You mean like the Cannabis Control Commission's final reading, like that?
Hearing no further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed?
And I was an aye.
Record show
5-0.
5. Article 5, similar proposal from the chairman of the planning board who spoke earlier this evening. It's kind of go hand in glove. Articles 4 and 5, and so we'll entertain a motion.
I guess I'll make the same motion that we'll make our recommendation at town meeting following the public hearing process.
Motion made by Selectman Valencourt.
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Keen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 5-0. Article 6 is the request that the Board of Selectmen make a favorable action to direct us to do something that we don't need town meeting to direct us to do. So, again, we have 4 options: favorable action, unfavorable action, take no action, or to be made at town meeting.
I will make a motion that we take no action on this article, since it is not necessary for us to do what it says. And to the points of some of the public that came to speak, I'm afraid by making a favorable action, which I obviously want to be able to authorize the town manager to do this if we are going to have this business here, but by recommending favorable action, I think that it might mislead the public that somehow these figures are vetted by me or in any way agreed by me, which I have no idea if those are the right figures. So I recommend we take no action, or I make a motion we take no action.
Seconded.
Motion made by Selectman Keen, seconded by Selectman Nobley. Any further discussion?
I would agree with that, because I think, as we've all said this evening, this was just trickery to get us to a town meeting.
Well, we didn't all say that.
Well, then, you can excuse yourself from that, what I have just said, but I think most of the people agree that this was just a ploy to get us to a town meeting in order for the applicant to complete their hurried and rushed application, which is...
So I guess I'd identify 2 things with that. One is that we have experience with the type of negotiation that town manager Mailer has proven over the past 6 years. He's proven himself to be a very effective and savvy negotiator. And I have confidence, based upon his track record, that he will extract the optimal agreement. I'll put that piece aside. I guess I don't want this discussion to close without making a general statement that we all come to this with a certain orientation, and some of this is about a business plan, some of this is about how we feel about the product itself, and some of this is about what's coming out of our household. And what I am encouraged here is that we are likely going to have a very high turnout, and that the more people that attend, the more representative this decision is going to be of our community. And I think that's important, given what this is. But I would also say that this is about opportunity. That's what, that's really what it's opportunity depending upon where you stand, whether that's revenue, whether that's the medical gains, whether it's people who like recreational drugs. It's all of those people are involved and going to be affected by it. And it seems to me that we're looking at trying to make a decision here with not having all the pieces together. That's true for any kind of new business coming into our community. And that's a tough thing for all of us to deal with. It's making some decisions on the unknowns and some speculation. So at the end of the day, I just want to see as many people attend this town meeting and to have their voices heard clearly and openly. And the fact that you folks showed tonight, I appreciate that. I hope more folks are energized by the discussion. And I'm very pleased that our planning board put the time in to get us to this point. Because yes, they could have run out the clock, but I think they did the right thing, which is to take the 6 months to get to the decision to put us in a position here. So.
Any further discussion?
What I would recommend to the board is that as part of the motion to recommend no action, that an explanation be included as to why the board is recommending no action,
We
because
did the same thing last year.
there are going to be a number of people that aren't listening or watching tonight and will only be reading the warrant and to understand why the board
I think
is
that's a
taking
good
no action
suggestion, and I think we did the same last year. I think we should.
on the, right.
So do we need to amend the motion?
Yes.
Did
I'd like to
we
include that.
agree to take no action?
Well, no,
Well, I'm saying as part of
If we
the
choose
no action
Yeah, I'll amend
recommendation.
my motion to be, we recommend take no action for the reason that we do not have to have an authorization from town meeting.
And to include an explanation in the warrant itself.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And because we have not entered into a negotiation to be able to comment on these numbers.
Right.
Those two reasons are why I'm suggesting take no action and that be included in the warrant.
So,
So let me be clear, so are you suggesting that the town manager not work on this host community agreement till
No,
after?
I'm not saying that. Perhaps we'll make progress and we'll have something, but at this moment, we don't. Or certainly these numbers aren't my numbers.
See, that's,
so,
The no
so
action is on this
There's-
article.
This article.
there's,
Not on the
Right, not on the
next
next
is-
thing on the agenda. On this article, I'm
yeah,
saying we
and
take.
so motion made by Selectman Keen to recommend that we take no action, that it be expressed that we already have the authority to move forward and enter into this without town meeting's approval. And so any vote would be unnecessary. So that motion was made by Selectman Keen. Do I hear a second? She's since amended it. Seconded by Selectman Valencourt. Any discussion on the amended motion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? 5-0. Final item on the agenda, or I should say under consent this evening, is a vote to authorize the town manager to resume negotiations with Mass Innovation Works regarding a host community agreement. This would not be something necessarily presented at town meeting, but the town manager has not been proceeding with discussions with this particular applicant, again, Mass Innovation Works. And so do we, as a Board of Selectmen, want to give him direction to be able to go back to Mass Innovation Works and hear their proposals, present counter proposals, again, and participate in any discussion about any such host community agreement.
I'm gonna make a motion that we do that, just so that we can have further discussion on this item, because I have some questions that I'd like to ask. So I'll make a motion that we authorize the town manager to resume negotiations with Mass Innovation Works regarding a host community agreement.
Motion made by Selectman Valencourt. Do I hear a second?
second.
Seconded by Selectman Nobley.
So I guess my comments are we going to put some kind of a time frame on this? Is this something that we would like to see at least draft or very close to finished by January 30th? And is that even possible at this point?
exactly.
Um,
Town council is going to be away, town manager is away, we'll be back in a few days. So again, we're going to just rush through an extremely important document to be prepared for
Well,
town meeting.
I don't,
But-
yes, I don't know that this is not something that needs to be
Yeah.
ready for town meeting.
That's my point.
Well, I'm questioning the timeline, though. I am asking about the timeline. But, again, the town meeting, we didn't have a choice on the date there. I mean, we had a choice, but it was within 45 days. So the rush thing is kind of moot because it's not.
But we have a choice on this. We
Yes,
can
we
do this
and that's why I'm
afterwards.
asking the timeline.
Yeah.
So I'm asking what we want to set
We
for
hold all the
timeline.
leverage. I feel like if we place a timeline or I should say, if we place an end date as opposed to negotiating until we find something, then it puts our backs against the wall. We hold all the leverage.
Okay.
I think the point is more that we are not having an artificial timeline of January 30th. Right.
Unless folks around this table.
I mean, I don't think we
I'm
should.
not in favor
I don't
of an
Well, I think we've
artificial
heard
timeline.
comments tonight that, that the public would like to have something available at town
Well, I
meeting so they
would-
understand what
yeah.
it is, what the agreement would
Yeah.
be. So, there is some
That's-
interest there in seeing what we're gonna
Yeah.
have before we get to town meeting,
Right.
because it could weigh some people's decisions.
Yeah.
You would in essence
It's
need
way-
to,
it's
you would
way, I'd say it's
in
way.
essence need a complete agreement to vote on, that the board would be voting on prior to town meeting. You only
Yeah,
have
that's
the meeting
fine.
of the 22nd, and then, as I previously stated, a short meeting prior to town meeting.
I
Those
mean-
are your only meetings before
Yeah, I
January
don't think
30th.
there's
Let me
a reason
remind
to
my-
have
I
those
hate to
community
say
agreements.
this, but that's not our fault. I don't want to be rushed to enter into a host community agreement so that the public can use that as their determination whether or not it's good enough to allow this business. If they need it and they don't have it, and they vote no because they don't have it, then that's unfortunate that the applicant chose to rush this.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, that's
I
a
hate
good
to say
point.
it that way, because I think that this could be good for the town. I don't want that site to continue being underutilized. But I also am not going to rush into an agreement and do something premature and not get the best benefit for us because of the rush. I mean,
And I
just-
agree with you, and I could say, the original Wheelabrator, now it has corrected itself. We were supposed to get electricity for free, and perhaps Charlie Salisbury he was more involved in that. I'm talking, well, we don't want to be the original Wheelabrator. They have since changed. But years, we were supposed to get electricity for nearly nothing, and that didn't happen. The GLSD was to clean up the Merrimack River, but how many years did it smell horrible? And so for the same reason, we cannot rush this.
Well, that answers my question.
So there's no need to.
I mean,
Right.
and I think, just to reiterate, I would also love for the public to know, and I would like to know, but I don't, it's not my fault. They can't, I guess, but I mean, I don't think we should rush it so that they can know, or that we can know.
At town meeting, but this is
Right.
still a venue. These Board of Selectmen meetings, I mean, the email agenda items, all of that will end up becoming part of the public record before we ever vote on anything.
Yes, I'm not saying they
It's not.
shouldn't eventually know, they should, I'm
The
saying
Board
for
of Selectmen
this
is not-
special town meeting.
The
it
Board of
should
Selectmen
not
is
be.
not voting, even when that does happen, is not voting on a host community agreement behind closed, excuse me. The folks in the audience could wait until afterward.
They're tired.
Likewise, so let us finish. So there is a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No, I'm,
Aye. Okay, all in favor
thank you
of
for asking.
resuming negotiations?
Resuming negotiations.
So old business, we have none. New business. There's no new business. Public comment, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to talk about anything, or I should say wants to offer their comment about anything.
Frank Reagan, EC 1939 Great Pond Road. I just started coming to the selectmen's meetings. Years ago, I had occasion to be here, but there was a long span where I didn't come down. But I am really, really shocked at the way you've conducted these meetings, especially the words coming out of your mouth. I can't believe it. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people, Mr. Noble, at town meeting, and in 3 minutes, they're going to have their say. And do you think that the most important thing that's ever come to this town, and I've been here since 1985, going on 33 years, this is the most important thing that's come to this town. And you heard some people talk and tell you that had they known that we were going to be known as the largest marijuana growing facility, I was going to say in the country, maybe in the world, they wouldn't have bought their house here. It's going to give North Andover a black name. And basically, you're rushing into this, and the petitioner is pushing all these boards, and all these boards are succumbing to the petitioner. And it shouldn't be. You guys are representing the citizens of the town. You do all the business for the town. Nobody has come out and said why this is such a great thing for the town of North Andover. All we know is you vote in favor of it. This petitioner bought this property on a distress sale for almost $14 million in 2003. He came into the town, and immediately the town worked with him, and they gave him a TIF agreement. And what a TIF agreement is a break in taxes. And we were going to have condominiums out there, we were going to have residential buildings, we were going to have commercial stores, we were going to have a train station out there. How many people have caught a train at 1600 Osgood Street? And then that all failed because of, all I could think of is bad marketing. And that all failed. So now he's coming back, and suddenly the state votes on legalizing marijuana, even though the town of North Andover voted it down. and voted it down again at town meeting, at our last town meeting, and voted it down because they come in such disarray. They were proposing amendments the night of town meeting. And now tonight they come in, and the attorney comes up here and he speaks, and he's throwing questions at them, and they still don't have answers for him. And yet we're going to go ahead and we're going to support this thing. This is totally, totally wrong. And you're making a big mistake by doing this. And you know what the result is going to be? You're going to have to answer to it when you run for re-election, if you decide that you want to even run for re-election. You're wrong. They should vote this down. We shouldn't allow the largest manufacturer of marijuana in the town of North Andover, because that's what we're going to be known for. We're not going to be known for being a professional town, and this is what I've seen since '85. We are run very professionally by the people that run this place. I've seen a new town hall. I've seen a new police station. I've seen a brand-new fire department. I've seen a new high school. We did all of this without any money or any income from marijuana. We did it because we have professional people in the town. Ray Santilli is responsible for a lot of this stuff, because as these buildings went up, he was kind of the clerk of the works. Now, all of a sudden, we need this money, and these numbers are just thrown at us with no support, no documentation. I don't know how many of you listened to Karen in her explanation on here, but there was a lot of fact in that. There was a lot of fact, and it's very complex and hard to understand, and we're at a loss because we don't have an assessor right now in North Andover. We have somebody that's filling the bill that started as a temporary person, but we don't have a full-time assessor. And it's very difficult. Karen is well-respected in our association. I think you guys ought to listen to her. And I think you ought to really think deeply before you come up with your recommendation at town meeting. Thank you.
See no other public comment. We don't have our town manager here this evening to provide a report. Mr. Santilli, do you want to provide any?
You had been informed earlier this evening that we had a water main break up on Great Pond Road. I was hoping to receive an update during this meeting, which I have unfortunately not, so.
Still broken then.
I would assume that they're still working on it, yes. 800s.
Any questions otherwise?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have to say, probably due to the late hour, and I do apologize, I would like to change my vote. When I was listening to Regina saying that she didn't want to rush it, and I voted the wrong way, and I really wish, with the board's indulgence, that I could retract that vote.
Which vote?
The last one. I
The
do not
resuming
want,
negotiations.
do not want them to resume negotiations. As we were discussing, it was like, we don't want to rush it, we don't want a timeline. So I misinterpreted that, and whether we change it or not, I want it to be on the record that, again, maybe due to the lateness of the hour and listening to the discussion, that it's, I voted the wrong way for my beliefs, but.
Okay. Otherwise, if there's nothing else on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to
You
adjourn.
just at least add that, thank you.
To adjourn?
Motion made by Selectman Nobley, seconded by Selectman Valencourt. All in favor?
Aye.